Order, order. John Lamont to move the motion.
Thank you, Sir Edward. I beg to move this House has considered E-petition 727309 relating to a general election, and it's truly a pleasure to serve with you in the chair, Sir Edward. Democracy is fundamental to any free and functioning country. Every one of us in this House is here for one reason. Our constituents put their trust in us through the ballot box. We stood on manifestos, political parties made promises, and voters judged those promises and placed their faith in those they believed would honour them. That is why this petition matters. More than 1 million people have signed this petition calling for a general election, including 1,124 people in my own constituency in the Scottish Borders. Of course, it is important to be clear. Under our constitutional arrangements, a petition itself cannot trigger a general election. That authority rests with the Prime Minister, unless overridden by a vote of no confidence. Even so, I hope the Government will reflect carefully on the scale of this petition. Parliament considers many petitions, but the size of this one and the speed with which public support has been mobilised sets it apart. Each week, as I speak to constituents across the Scottish Borders, most fair-minded people accept that governments must adapt to world events and unexpected challenges, whether a pandemic or a war. What they will not accept is a party promising one thing before an election and then doing the complete opposite in power. Happily give way.
I thank my honourable friend for giving away. Does he agree with me that what Labour promised before the election, from farmers to publicans, is a complete betrayal? And that's why almost 2,000 of my constituents in South Shropshire have signed this, because they believe the government has failed and has betrayed the British people.
Yeah. My honourable friend is absolutely right, and that word betrayal I'm going to return to later, but I think it's the real sense of what was promised before the election has simply not been delivered. Now, during the 2024 general election campaign, Labour promised one thing above all else, and that was change. Well, Sir Edward, we have certainly seen change, but it is not for the better. On the morning of Friday, the 5th of July 2024, the new Prime Minister stood on the steps of Number 10 and promised a government of service. He promised to put the country before party. He promised not to raise taxes. You're not saying aye now, are you? He promised accountability and transparency. But the question many of us are now asking, service to whom? To his hard left backbenchers? To his trade union paymasters? This Labour government has now been in power for 18 months, and Britain is suffering as a result. We have a Prime Minister surrounded by advisers who appear to lack both clarity of purpose and a coherent plan for the country. Now, let us remind ourselves of some of the broken promises that has fuelled this public anger. Winter fuel payments were cut within weeks of Labour taking office, leaving pensioners feeling the cold last winter. Labour's manifesto promised not to increase national insurance, yet the jobs tax raised employer national insurance and, combined with the Unemployment Rights Act, has increased the cost of hiring a worker by around £1,000. In total, we have seen £64 billion in tax rises across the Chancellor's first two budgets. Now, let's hope for all of our sakes the Chancellor doesn't get a chance to deliver another budget. Now, before the election, the Prime Minister told the National Farmers Union that losing a farm is not like losing any other business. It can't come back. He was right. Yet his government then introduced the family farm tax, a policy that threatens the future of family farms across the country. While we welcome the partial U-turn announced just before Christmas, this tax should be scrapped entirely. I pay tribute to the farmers for their tireless campaigning over the last year, including many in my own constituency, like Peter Douglas from Hawick or Robert Neal from Jedburgh. Sir Edward, pubs and hospitality businesses are also facing a bleak future under this Labour government. Rising business rates, higher costs and the jobs tax are battering businesses that are vital to our economy. Pubs like the Allenton Inn in Berwickshire or the Black Bull in Lauder are at the heart of our local communities. Hospitality venues are closing, laying off staff and cutting hours as a direct consequence of this government's decisions. While the number of pubs remained broadly stable up to the year 2024 following the Chancellor's jobs tax announcements, closures accelerated in the first half of 2025 at a rate of 2 venues per day. By mid-2025, there were 374 fewer pubs than at the start of the year. Illegal immigration is another clear example of failure. The Prime Minister promised to smash the gangs. Instead, small boats crossings rose by 13% up in Labour's first full year in office. Last year, more than 41,000 people entered the United Kingdom illegally, with 32,000 now housed in asylum hotels at the taxpayers' expense. Now, that outcome is hardly surprising, when one of the government's first acts was to scrap the deterrent to discourage illegal migrants from heading to the UK. Now, we know deterrents work. The previous Conservative government introduced the reduced the Albanian small boats crossings by over 90% through a returns agreement. We now have a Home Secretary who talks tough, but a government too weak to make the difficult decisions needed to fix the problem. Labour also promised to take back our streets and recruit more police officers. Instead, there are now 1,316 fewer police in England and Wales than when they took office. And then we have digital ID, something people did not vote for, did not want and do not need. Now, innovation has its place, but we should not mandate ID for law-abiding citizens or exclude those who choose not to participate from their full rights.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. I've made clear my views of the authoritarian approach of digital ID, but many constituents in South Shropshire would be excluded because of remote connectivity. Does he see this as a major issue?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. I mean, not only is it something that was not discussed before the election, it's something I don't think there's any public support for, but in rural constituencies like the constituency he represents and those communities that I also have in my constituency, there's a real issue with connectivity and how it will work in practice, and people may be deprived accessing vital public services as a consequence, if you believe some of the things that some Labour MPs are hoping this ID system will achieve. Now, Sir Edward, this government has been blown off course with multiple U-turns on income tax, on WASPI compensation, on welfare reform, and even on the long overdue inquiry into grooming gangs. The list grows longer and longer by the day. This government is riddled with chaos and scandal. Ministers resigning over fraud, corruption allegations, tax issues and ethical failures, right up to a Prime Minister who claims excessive freebies. Britain deserves better. Now, from my emails, surgeries and doorstep conversations, I know colleagues will recognise the same mood across the country. Disappointment, anger and a profound sense of betrayal. That word, betrayal, comes up time and time again. Now, Labour members opposite should reflect carefully on why so many people feel that way. The government's response to this petition was to dismiss it and to dismiss the voices of the more than 1 million people who signed it. Those concerns should not be brushed aside simply because parliamentary mechanisms do not allow this House to act on them directly. This government is giving the impression that it believes itself to be above public opinion. We, on this side of the House, will not allow that.
Will my honourable friend allow me?
Happily.
I'm
Francois.
As he knows, of the top 10 constituencies in the country, in terms of numbers of people who've signed the petition, 7 of those constituencies, including my own, were in Essex. That's how unpopular Labour is in Essex. Does he think that might have anything to do with why Labour councils want to cancel the local elections in Essex in May, or was it just an amazing coincidence?
Lamont.
my honourable friend makes an excellent point. Of course, when we had a previous petition this time last year on a similar subject, when again millions of people were signing it, I think again Essex was at the top of the league table in terms of the numbers of signatures to those petitions. But I think more broadly across the country, I'm a member of the Petitions Committee, which is why I am presenting this on behalf of the committee. There's a few other members of the Petitions Committee here today. I mean, we deal with petitions every single week, but very, very rarely do we see petitions attracting this level of support and this level of public participation, such as the sense of anger and betrayal that people feel out there in the country. Now, as I was saying, the Conservatives will continue to challenge and force reversals of damaging policies, just as we have done on the winter fuel payments, the family farm tax and the grooming gangs inquiry. Sir Edward, Labour promised to be different, but instead they have presided over a catalogue of broken promises, scandals and policy announcements that no one supports. Happily give way.
In preparing for this e-petition debate, I clicked on to the House of Commons Library service, which did invite members to look at a government tracker. It was a full-fact registered charity and independent fact-checked organisation. Can I ask if the honourable member clicked on that and looked at that finding in relation to the 86 pledges from the Labour Party manifesto?
I've not looked at that particular facility. I'm here to represent the million people who have signed the petition calling for an immediate election. And for all the people that I speak to each week in my constituency who are fed up with the U-turns and the betrayals and the chaos that this government, the party that he represents, is presiding officer over. And I will make no apology for standing up for those people and putting the case that they have asked me to make on their behalf. Now, the party opposite and the government opposite may still have the votes, as he has demonstrated, but they have lost the country. Britain deserves far better than this Prime Minister and this failing Labour government.
I'm sure the honourable member will also remember the Prime Minister saying that not a penny more on your council tax will be implemented by this Labour government. Yet constituents in the Worth Valley across Keighley and Ilkley have experienced a rise of 14.99% under Labour-run Bradford Council in the last 2 years. Does he feel that that meets what the Prime Minister's promise was?
No. John makes an excellent point. I mean, one of my recollections from the last general election was the then Conservative leader Rishi Sunak taking part in the leaders' debate, saying, mark my words, if you think Labour is going to win this election, start saving now because they are going to put up your taxes. And guess what? He was absolutely right. Tax after tax after tax have gone up, despite the promises that the Labour leader, I'll happily take interventions from the members opposite, but all the promises Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, made not to put up taxes, and look at us now, £64 billion worth of tax rises, thanks to the Labour Chancellor just in the last 18 months. What an absolute embarrassment. No wonder people are fed up with politics. No wonder people don't want to take part in voting anymore. They feel utterly, utterly betrayed. And all of you lot are responsible. Thank you.
You lot, not me. No, thank you very much. The question is that this House has considered E-petition 727-309 relating to a general election. I'm not going to impose a time limit, but you can see there's quite a lot of people trying to speak, so I'm sure you'll be considerate to colleagues, and we'll focus on the petition, on the need for a general election, and I'll call Patrick Hurley first.
It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. This petition presents itself as the voice of democratic urgency. In truth, it's something we're far more familiar with, and something that is far less noble. It's nothing more than the collective stamping of feet, accompanied by the online equivalent of the call and response of what do we want and when do we want it. We've all encountered this impulse before, or at least those of us who are parents have. It's an impulse pandered to by the Tory MPs here today. It's the impulse of the toddler. But a democracy cannot be run like a nursery. And this great country of ours who they repeatedly let down over 14 years of decline, cannot be governed like one either. However loudly certain voices and certain views might be expressed, or however much those views are featured on GB News or shared late at night on Facebook after half a bottle of wine. Because here's the truth. You don't get something simply because you want it. Yeah.
Is he seriously saying, because his attitude, I have to say, is unbelievably patronising, is he seriously saying that the over 1 million people across the UK who signed this petition are basically all children who don't know what they're doing? Because that's his implication, which is deeply insulting to 1 million plus people, including our constituents.
Thanks for his intervention. So back in 1983, when he was leader of the opposition, Michael Foot, you might remember Michael Foot. No, he's never going to get to be leader of the opposition. Michael Foot thought he was storming to victory back in 1983. Look at this, he said to John Golding at the time. He said, I've got a rally here, there's 1,000 people cheering me on. But Michael, John replied, there's 120,000 outside, think you're crackers. You've got 1 million people sign a petition? How many people vote in the general election? Well more than 1 million people. This Parliament was elected in a general election, held under rules that were well known in advance. And those rules include a parliamentary term. They might not like it, but it's true. They do not include a rolling plebiscite triggered whenever a sufficiently large group of people become bored, frustrated, impatient, or whether they've had a video clip shared to them on the WhatsApp. Yeah?
I wonder if the honourable member might acknowledge that in the history of petitions debates, that the two most highly subscribed to debates have been asking for a general election in this Parliament. Would he acknowledge the fact that even the fact that both of those petitions had over £1 million, people signing the petition, illustrates the huge frustration out there at this current government that they do want the government to change course?
I'll acknowledge that 1 million people want the government to change course. The petitioners who have put their names to this petition, they say, well, the people want change. They are not the majority of the people in this country. There are tens and tens of millions of people in this country, and 1 million signed this petition. And here's the news. The people actually got change in 2024. 18 months ago, we got a government that explicitly said it wasn't just going to go and put sticking plasters on the gaping wounds of the previous 14 years. We got a government that explicitly said it would take a decade of national renewal was what we went to the people with 18 months ago, and that's what they were happy to promote and happy to vote for. Because we said it would take a decade to fix the country's problems and to fix the mess they left us in. And the people who want change now are those very same people who want to go back to the years of stagnation and decline under the Conservatives. The years of Eric Pickles and his austerity, George Osborne and his austerity, Michael Gove and his austerity too, and of course, the self-harming referendum, which has done this country no favours whatsoever. In every part... Go on. If he wants.
He may recall that 17.3 million people voted in that referendum, peacefully and democratically, to leave the European Union, which is a lot more people than voted for Labour in the last general election. So if he's not prepared to respect the opinion of 1 million people who've signed this petition, and he's all about numbers today, would you respect the opinion of 17.3 million people who voted to leave the EU, or is that not a big enough number for him either?
Those people voted in good faith, and they were lied to by people like him.
I beg your pardon?
Inadvertently. Inadvertently lied. I will withdraw.
No, you must withdraw.
I will withdraw.
No.
But does he respect the vote in 1975 for the exact same thing about staying in the European community as it was, because that vote got overturned 40 years later. Because in every parliament, at every moment, some people want change and other people don't. Some want more spending, some don't. Some want radical reform, others want stability. And the fact of merely wanting something to happen does not constitute a constitutional imperative. If it did, government would be paralysed. We'd lurch endlessly from one election to the next, just like we did at the end of the last decade, incapable of governing because the government is perpetually campaigning. That's not evidence of a democracy that works. That's evidence of a democracy that's failing, just like it failed in 2017, just like it failed in 2019, and just like it failed when the party opposite were partying while members of the royal family were dying. An election is not a comfort blanket to be demanded whenever politics becomes difficult or whenever the previous government's chickens come home to roost. There's a tendency in debates like this, though, to treat an election as though it's some sort of harmless release valve. It's not. A general election is disruptive, expensive, and all-consuming. It stalls legislation, it freezes decision-making, and it turns Parliament in on itself. Now, that might be necessary. Indeed, it is necessary at the right moment. But it's not something to be done after 18 months simply because you've run out of patience.
Will it give way?
Of course.
I'm genuinely quite baffled that there are so many members from the party opposite here, including Reform, given that they've missed important debates in this House on things like employment rights. And also, to be fair to the Conservatives, they went to debates on things like VE Day and VJ Day. There were no Reform MPs there for those debates. What does he make of that?
It looks like Reform only turn out when there's something in it for them, as far as I can see. We should be honest about what this petition represents. It's not a considered proposal for better governance of this country. You can tell that by the way they're giggling behind the hands on the other side of the room. It's not accompanied by a constitutional argument that we want to change this place to make it better. It's not accompanied by any sort of legislative necessity either. It's simply an expression of dissatisfaction at how long it's taken the new government to fix the problems that were left behind after 14 years of chaos, division and decline caused by the party opposite. Years of economic stagnation, a referendum of such consequential proportions that the country hasn't grown its economy barely since 2016. And a Tory government that was more concerned with looking after itself than with looking after the most vulnerable in this country. Doesn't look like it. If adults behaved in their working lives the way this petition urges Parliament to behave, abandoning responsibility at the first sight of trouble, demanding resets whenever outcomes fail to please them, we'd call that irresponsible, we'd call it childish, we would not reward it. Democracy requires more than just knee-jerk, reflexive wanting. To indulge every demand for an immediate election is not to respect the voters, it's to infantilise them. I won't. The House should do better than that. Thank you, Sir Edward.
Ollie Glover.
Thank you, Sir Edward. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship. And can I thank the Honourable Member for Berwickshire, Roxburgh and Selkirk for his very eloquent introduction of this important topic. Now, over 1 million people have signed this petition, and of those, 4,929 were my constituents in Didcot and Wantage in Oxfordshire. And I just want to start by summarising some of the reasons that they gave when they wrote in to me for why they have asked for this general election and indeed this debate. In no particular order, the some people feel that the impact of this government on small business and economic growth is too much to bear. For example, a small business owner considering having to close his business as a consequence. For some, it was more international matters, concerns about the government's approach to the Gaza situation, as an example. But others still felt that working class people have been disregarded and betrayed by this government, given what was promised before the general election. And for others, again, there was an overriding feeling of dissatisfaction and general incompetence. And some were concerned about the impact of VAT on school fees, in particular those who send their children with special educational needs to private institutions. But, Sir Edward, although I am no fan of the government and I agree with some of those criticisms, I'm afraid I must politely disagree with my constituents, and I don't think we should have a general election. And the reasons for that are, well, three of them really. I mean, first of all, there is no straightforward criteria for assessing when it is a time for a government to end early, because under our current first-past-the-post system, almost never does a government earn more than 50% of support in the first place. So we could end up with an endless revolving door of elections and brand new government chaos. And I think the period of the late 2000s where we did see very frequent general elections did not lead to a general increase in satisfaction with the political system or a feeling that economic or general outcomes for the country improved. And to be fair, governments do deserve time to learn the ropes and get things right, albeit I would say this government has not necessarily used their time so far very well. But I think we must really hear and understand the underlying reasons that have led to this petition and this call for a general election. And there are lots of things that we need to change about our politics. We need to make our politics relevant and responsive again. And I'm afraid, notwithstanding the very good opening remarks by the Honourable Member for Berwickshire, Roxburgh and Selkirk, the exchange that we heard in the previous speech is perhaps shows what is wrong with our politics at the moment and why it puts people off. Relitigating the arguments of 10 or 15 years ago and a lot of he said, she said or they said between the two major parties that between them have been running our country overwhelmingly for, 100 years or more. So instead, I offer some better ways to address the discontent and to boost engagement with politics. At the risk of sounding naive and full of optimism for the future, which my colleagues on my benches will know that I never do that, as I've yet to understand the philosophical or intellectual basis of optimism. But putting that to one side, I think what we really need in our politics is more listening to each other, more sharing of political ideas, not just as parties, but also as 650 people who all have different backgrounds and bring those backgrounds and life experiences to this place. And we need to do that to get better representation of our constituents, because none of us individually can hope to represent directly, have the lived experience of all of our tens of thousands of constituents. It's impossible. So we can only do it by learning from them and listening and reflecting on what we learn from them. I'm happy to give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
So I do thank him for his constructive comments about the need to change the political culture inside this place. But I think there is a need to change it right across the country in our councils and also in our devolved governments. Does he agree that working to roll out PR right across all our electoral systems would actually change the culture both in the country and in this place?
Well, I thank the Honourable Gentleman for his intervention, and I'm going to have to launch a cyber-security inquiry. So he's clearly hacked my notes, and I entirely agree with the Honourable Gentleman, and I do pay tribute to him because I know that he is a consistent and passionate advocate for proportional representation, as am I, and that is something on which we can agree. And actually, some of the reasons given for people signing the petition was that they would like to see proportional representation, because they feel that the current government does not represent the views of the country. Now, of course, many people meant that critically, but it's also a simple numerical fact that a voting system which gives someone, a party that won 33.7% of the vote on the lowest turnout in 24 years, of course, it'd be unrealistic to even hope that that government could represent the views of the country, because it is so far below representing 50% at least of what people think. So yes, In the absent us changing the culture of this place so that we have more listening and sharing of ideas, I do agree with the honourable gentleman that we need proportional representation in order to create a structure for enabling that. Proportional representation, and we could have a long debate about what forms it could take, but I think that people would find that even more dull than anything else. But proportional representation would enshrine the ideas of more than one party having to cooperate, compromise, listen, engage in order to form a more broad-based and more representative government. I also feel we need to get back to the idea of fixed-term parliaments. Now, it was perhaps a matter of regret or irony that the time when we did have fixed-term parliaments was a time of some of the greatest political turmoil that this country has had, but that does not mean that the idea is not sound. It is not right that a Prime Minister of whatever party affiliation should be able to treat the country like a political casino and choose on a whim when to have a general election. It does not help serious policy or thinking for the long term over that 4 or 5 years. And instead, a fixed-term parliament would give everybody clarity on how long a government is in, obviously absent some particularly drastic circumstances. It would be good for the economy, it would be good for the markets, it would be good for that government itself. It would certainly be good for civil servants and people who have to enact the instructions of that government. We also need reform to political finances in this country. Of course, thankfully, we are a long way from the tens or hundreds of millions of dollars in every special election in the United States. But it is still important that large financial interests are not able to have a disproportionate influence on this, on our politics, or at least not without proper transparency and declaration. So more is needed to strengthen the role of the Electoral Commission. We also need a media landscape that is fueled by facts and respectful discussion of views, rather than misinformation or a lot of the screaming that happens between people of different views on social media. That is something that is also important for creating a better politics. So, whilst I share a lot of the criticisms of the government that have led to my constituents signing this petition, instead of a general election now, I hope that the government, and I hope to hear from the Minister, will reflect on what else we can do to restore or build people's faith in politics and have a much more broad-based political system. Who knows? Maybe today, this afternoon, the Minister will have a Damascene conversion to proportional representation. I look forward to finding out.
Thank you. I thank you for a cerebral speech, which will probably do you no good at all. George Newbury.
Thank you, it's a pleasure to speak with you in the chair. I am very much an advocate for these e-petitions debates because they enable our constituents to set the agenda here in Westminster Hall. And I thank the Petitions Committee for their hard work, as always. E-petition debates are an excellent example of our democracy in action, and the importance of them should never be underestimated. Wherever possible, I've taken the chance to speak in each petition debate where Cannock Chase has been a top signatory, to make sure that I'm present in discussions that my constituents so clearly want me to be a part of. That's included animal slaughter, it's included immigration, paternity pay, all topics more than deserving of time in this House. But the reality of what we're here to debate this afternoon is that calling for a general election in this way is simply not how our democracy works. The people who sign this petition, who feel that they are not happy with the government or feel that things haven't changed in the way they hoped or perhaps as quickly as they expected, have every right to voice those frustrations. As an MP who lives in their constituency, who has weekly surgeries, who goes out knocking on doors, I'm not naive to the reasons why this petition has gathered more than 1 million signatures, and I hear week in, week out about the difficulties and challenges that my constituents face. One of the criticisms, though, that's levelled at politicians is that we are incapable of thinking in the long term, that we're bound by 4 or 5 year terms, perhaps even less if this petition got its way. So there isn't enough time to focus on tackling the systemic issues that lead to the things that many of our constituents want us to address. We only need to look across the Atlantic to see what elections every 2 years does to political culture and the ability for leaders to get things done. And indeed, so many of us on this side of the House talk about the last 14 years, not only because of the decline we feel and a great majority of the public feel Britain suffered during that time, but also because the short-term thinking during those 4 terms, which led to mammoth challenges like a crisis in the public finances, crumbling infrastructure, prisons at bursting point, the NHS on its knees, immigration at over 1 million net a year, small boats crossing the Channel, asylum hotels, the list goes on. This government is doing the unusual thing in rejecting the sticking plaster politics of the short-term sugar rush and instead going about the difficult job of fixing the big issues that Britain faces, some of which have been decades in the making. Now we're preparing for... Yes, I have to give way.
And I thank the honourable member for giving way. I wonder if he might also agree with me that the very idea of calling a general election would undermine the whole principle of representative democracy, particularly in communities like mine and his, communities that voted for long-term political change rather than a short-term set of solutions and political churn.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more with my honourable friend. I was really struck, particularly in the general election campaign, knocking on doors, listening to my constituents who, contrary to what you might think when you see opinion polls that particularly these days waver quite dramatically, really wanted us to knuckle down and focus in a 4 or 5 year term on tackling those long-term issues that we know are there in our country and in many cases still need to be tackled. And when I was preparing for the debate, I wondered whether Prime Ministers of yesteryear, where they'd been after 18 months into their tenure. So I had a look, and Margaret Thatcher, who I will never praise, but who I think is fair to say did make decisions with a belief in doing the right thing rather than the popular thing, was in fact 13% behind in the polls in the December of 1980. John Major was a whole 22% behind. Tony Blair was actually 28% ahead, and happily undermining my point there. But then Gordon Brown was 7% behind, David Cameron was a few percent behind, and then the right honourable member for Richmond and Northallerton was 23% behind, and just a month later, of course, decided to call a general election. So yes, few governments enjoy widespread support 18 months into their time in office, but few have addressed an inheritance like the one this government was left just 18 months ago as rapidly. I don't know about other honourable members, but I quite enjoy a bit of positivity. Blue Monday is just around the corner, but if you listen to some of the contributions in this debate, you might be mistaken for thinking that it's today. But the reality is that after a year of Labour, our NHS received £29 billion of boost in funding. That translated into more than 5 million additional appointments, which, contrary to the talk of broken promises, was more than double what we promised in our manifesto. We secured a £400 million investment to boost clinical trials, improving NHS services and driving growth. And we brought 1,000 GPs into the workforce. I worked supporting general practice before I came into this place, and I know the difference that that is already making. And 1,000 practices are being modernised, including Chasmore Medical Practice, Rawnsley Surgery and Red Lion Surgery in my constituency. Of course, in the budget, the Chancellor also froze prescription charges, and we're opening 250 new neighbourhood health centres so that our constituents can get treated closer to home. But perhaps more than anything else, the NHS is a prime example of the cost of short-termism and the lack of investment in our public services that we saw under the previous government, and the progress that this government is making in short fashion. NHS satisfaction figures, much like opinion polls, reflect the fact that we have a long way to go, but we have made rapid progress towards rebuilding. In my part of the world and in many other coalfield communities, our retired mine workers who powered this country and did one of the most dangerous jobs anyone can do were ignored for 14 years. But within 18 months of this Labour government, members of both the Mine Workers Pension Scheme and the British Coal Staff Superannuation Scheme won the pension justice that they had fought so long for. With the transfer of £2.3 billion to members of the BCSSS and £1.5 million to the MPS, another historic injustice so dismissively overlooked under the previous government has been righted under this government. And on transport, for the first time since the 1990s, we have frozen rail fares. This will help millions of our constituents save money. And last year, the government confirmed backing for the improved M54-M6 link road, which will directly benefit commuters in Cannock Chase. And then, of course, the Bus Services Act will give transport authorities the ability to seize the opportunities of franchising and council-owned bus companies. On education, a quarter of children in my constituency are on free school meals. That is significantly above the national average. So I'm proud that we are rolling out free breakfast clubs across the country, making sure children go to school nourished and ready to learn. The government also announced funding for 300 new nurseries, including Heathay's Primary Academy in my constituency, which opened the doors of its new nursery back in September. Recently, we've scrapped the two-child benefit cap, and although the party opposite might disagree with lifting thousands of children in my towns and villages and 550,000 children across the country out of poverty, I think it's solving another stain on our country and an investment in the future, in the long-term success of our country. We've announced Homes for Heroes, which will ensure our veterans, as well as domestic abuse survivors and care leavers, can get a roof over their head, something that we've acted quickly on when nothing of the sort was done under the previous government in 14 years, let alone 18 months. Honourable members will be pleased to learn that I don't plan to list all of this government's achievements. It's time's far too short for that. I'm sure many of my colleagues will be able to expand. But looking into this year, by March we'll have more police on our streets. By April, more health hubs and an average of £150 off energy bills, with much more to come. Positive change takes time. We know this from many decades of history in this House and in town halls up and down this country. And I'd like to, before I close, state my position that Labour was elected with a resounding victory and a large majority, with a mandate to make decisions that turn this country around. Anybody looking at our manifesto can see a vision of what Britain will look like by the time we get to the next general election. And as always, that is how our political system works. That is how British governments have always been judged. You get 4 or 5 years and then the public have their say. And that's true, of course, of our activities as individual MPs, the only people that can speak up for the communities that we represent in this place. I'm proud in my first 18 months to have spoken more than 110 times on a huge range of topics, more than 7 times what my predecessor managed in her final 18 months representing the people of Cannock Chase. And I've held surgeries in villages that have never had an MP offer face-to-face appointments, and I very much hope, Sir Edward, to be able to continue that for many years to come. Thank you.
Order, just to remind colleagues that this is a debate about a general election, so we want to keep it focused on that. Harriet Baldwin.
Thank you very much, Sir Edward, for allowing me to speak on behalf of the 1,892 people in West Worcestershire who have signed this petition. And can I also thank my honourable friend, the member for Berwickshire, for really expounding exactly why this is an important debate. And it's one where I think this is in my 5th Parliament now. I don't recall the Petitions Committee having to call as many debates on calling another general election in any other Parliament. This follows last January's debate where 3 million people had signed the petition. And so I asked myself, why are we seeing this kind of appetite amongst our constituents to litigate the general election of 2024 so soon after it happened? I give way.
I believe I just heard the honourable member say that there'd been a petition with 3 million signatures last year and 1 million signatures this year. If that's correct, does that mean that the number of people calling for an election has fallen by 2/3?
I think that's probably 4 million people who have, in this length of time, signed this petition. So I would encourage the member to dream on that one. But I asked myself, why have we seen this kind of robust signing of these petitions over these 2 years? And I think it boils down to the fundamental principle of our democracy, which is based around people's manifestos, and how we do need to rely on political parties setting out a direction of travel in their manifesto and then trying to deliver that manifesto. So I think the problem that has led to all these signatures is really to do with the way in which we were not told about the plans for change that the government had in their manifesto. I could go on for the whole of this debate about just the tax changes alone, because of course we were told in the general election that the government had no plans, if they were to win the election, to raise taxes beyond what was outlined in their manifesto. And then within months of that, in the first budget, the Chancellor raised taxes by an astonishing £40 billion a year for the duration of this Parliament, and public spending by a further £30 billion, so a total of £70 billion a year increase in public spending, something that had been deliberately not stated during the general election campaign. But I won't spend my time talking about taxes. We've got would you like to intervene on taxes?
about people not being told about things at a general election. I just wonder how many people were told in the 2019 election that the Prime Minister would be replaced by then Boris Johnson, would be replaced by Liz Truss, and then replaced by Rishi Sunak. Isn't the point that things change over the course of a Parliament, and surely the change of a Prime Minister would be more merit for the calling of an election than the things that the Honourable Member has cited?
I think he needs to be careful what he says on that front, frankly. But to do with taxes specifically, I don't think he can point to a single time in history where within 3 months there has been such a dramatic change from what was promised to the public in a general election campaign and what actually happened in the budget. But I'm actually going to focus on the non-tax matters. We've got lots of votes on taxes over the course of the next few days. I'm going to raise some of the other things that this government has chosen to do in its first 18 months, which were decisively not in the manifesto. I would point to giving away the Chagos Islands and paying Mauritius to take them as a particularly egregious example not set out in the Labour manifesto. I would point to the fact that on multiple occasions now, elections are being cancelled. Local, incredibly important local elections are being cancelled, and that was certainly not in the Labour manifesto. I would point to the fact that it is going to be a feature of this government that they're going to propose curtailing jury trials. Something I noticed silence now on the government benches, but this is something that again was not in the Labour manifesto. I suppose you could grudgingly accept that purging political opponents from the other place was somewhat in the manifesto, but I don't think that stuffing the other place with political supporters to replace them was. I don't think cutting press conferences for the access to the press was in the Labour manifesto. I don't think introducing digital ID was in the Labour manifesto. I don't think rolling out an extensive increase in facial recognition on our streets was in the Labour manifesto. So I think that those are all things that, if they were happening in another country, you might think was the route to totalitarianism. I think this is the kind of thing that the public are very concerned about. So it's not just the huge increase in taxes, it's also the reduction in the kind of freedoms that we have taken for granted in this country for so many years that is causing so many of my constituents to call for another general election.
Alistair Strathairn.
Thank you, Sir. It's a pleasure to serve on your chairship. It's now just over 2 years, I think, since I was first elected to represent the community I live in, and there's really no greater privilege, I think, than getting to be here and stand up for our constituents' concerns, and particularly at a time when the stakes can feel like they are so high. I want to start in that spirit by thanking everyone who engaged in this petition and brought this debate to the House of Commons here today. As my honourable friend, the member for Cannock Chase, pointed out, petitions are an incredibly valuable way of ensuring that the public have an opportunity to continue to set the agenda in this place. And while I'm sure there is a great many things that I might disagree with some of the signatories on in terms of politics and policy, fundamentally I think we probably share a view and a concern that for a very long time, over successive parties, people have begun to worry that politicians haven't always done a good enough job of serving them, their priorities, and haven't shown themselves sufficiently capable always to delivering the change they're looking to see. And I don't think there's a single member in this House who should feel comfortable with the trend that we've been seeing over decades now in terms of public attitude to politicians and disillusionment with politics generally as a force for good. Now, the general election over 18 months ago was not the first general election campaign I've taken part in, not even the first. I stood in to be an MP, having had the opportunity, thanks to Nadine Dorries, to stand a little bit earlier in the last Parliament. But it was probably the one, I think, where the stakes felt highest, where the urgency of people's concerns about the challenges they were facing across our communities and their growing disillusionment about politicians' ability to affect them felt most acute. whether it was speaking to constituents whose health had been able to deteriorate far too poorly because of a long wait to see the NHS, whether it was speaking to families who were fighting to access affordable childcare or the right support for their child at school under a broken settlement, both at early years and at education, or whether it was speaking to people whose lives had been narrowed far too much by cost of living pressures, growing interest rate pressures that were not down to any failings of their own part, wasn't down to lack of hard work on their part, but was down to successive failures on the last government to drive down the cost of things that really impacted their life. And it got to the point where we were even on the very basics, whether it was secure borders, the ability to keep the roads in a fit state. People in my constituency were losing faith with the ability of politics to deliver on the things that actually touch their lives. And again, none of us should be comfortable with that. And as a party that's now in government, we must feel that responsibility of putting that right, particularly acutely. And so it's right that at moments like this, both the public and opposition parties represented here today have a chance to hold us to account for how we have dealt with the very many challenges we inherited. And there's no getting away, so over from the scale of some of those challenges that we've had to grapple with. Whether it's the fact that an NHS that already on its knees was looking at cutting appointments further, just at the time that needed to be putting back up, which was revealed to the Health Secretary just weeks into office, whereas it was the fact that our prisons were about to spill over, a fact known to the last government but not revealed to the public at the last general election, if we're talking about transparency going into elections, and the fact that the public finances were in an even tighter space, as validated by the feedback from the OBR, than they had been shared previously going into that general election. Those are all incredibly difficult circumstances to inherit. Now, they make me very angry, just as it makes the public understandably frustrated sometimes hearing about them. And I hear that frustration. I don't want to spend my time talking about challenges. I want to spend my time talking about solutions. But if we're going to be serious about putting right so many of the very real failings we inherited as a government, we have to start by being frank with the public about the real mess that we inherited and facing up to the really big and difficult choices needed to start putting right so many of the challenges that the last government ducked for far too long, right up to the calling of the general election. Only the last Prime Minister will know why he chose to go to the country early, but I don't think anyone in this room can credibly claim it was because he believed on his path things were only going to get better in the remaining time he had in office. And that in and of itself is a pretty damning indictment of the trajectory of the country that we inherited. Now, faced with all of that, we've absolutely had to start doing things that go beyond what we'd originally intended having to do in our last manifesto. It's not an easy thing to have to do as a politician, but I think it's the right and the brave thing to do when the circumstances dictate big, difficult choices to step up and meet the needs of those moments. To not shy away from the fact that if we weren't going to find ways to invest billions more into the NHS, a situation that was already too difficult for too many of my constituents was only going to get worse. So to make sure that we were investing in the things that right across my constituency were already starting to show people that the state wasn't working, whether it was putting more money into SEND provision, whether it was investing back in fixing crumbling schools, or whether it's a record settlement for repairing roads, starting to fix thread by thread the fabric of the broken Britain that we'd inherited, and hopefully, over time between now and the next general election, start to be able to demonstrate to people that, yet again, politics can be a force for good. Now, there are very many individual things that I'm incredibly proud of over the last year that we've been able to deliver, whether it's investment into my local hospital and create new and expanded GP surgery places, meaning that we can deliver more appointments and deliver some of the fastest falls and waiting lists across the country. In my area, I know that will making a real difference to the people who've already been seen. Whether it's investment in extra nurse provision, free breakfast provision, making sure that we're investing in the expanded SEND places that my community needs. Again, there will be families' lives who've already been touched for the better by the change this government's brought. And from the record investment that we're now putting into fixing some of our broken roads to the greater devolved transport powers around buses that we've given to Hertfordshire County Council, I know for too many constituents where they've seen for too long now issues with transport, issues with public transport, issues with driving around, we are starting to invest in things that over time will show them that politics can be a force for good on their priorities again. Now, I won't want to pretend for 1 second that any of those choices, any of those individual changes will have touched everyone's lives in my constituency yet, nor will they completely have delivered the scale of change that we need to be able to show by the next general election. But they are down payments on the promise we made at the last election, and they are down payments on the causes that I'm committed on behalf of my constituents to continuing to campaign on every day that I'm lucky enough to serve in this place. Now, I do not know when the next general election may be, but I'm pretty confident in saying it's unlikely to be this year. And so while I can't promise that I'm going to agree with the petitioners on that urgent ask, I can promise them that, along with all of my colleagues, every day that I'm lucky enough to serve here, I will be working to tackle not just those individual issues, but the wider cause of disillusionment that caused them to sign this petition in the first place. I won't get everything right. I'm sure I alone will be making plenty more mistakes, however many years I've got left in this place. But I will always be looking to deliver on the intent of restoring that faith in politics, of restoring the public services they rely on, and showing them that, yes, under this Labour government, we will be delivering the change they voted for. We will be taking decisions day in, day out that will make a tangible difference to their lives over the years to come. And together, we can start to turn the tide on the managed decline and broken political settlement we've tolerated for far too long in this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Treadwell. Lee Anderson.
It is indeed a pleasure to serve once again under your chairship, and let's be honest, if this petition was to likely to trigger a general election, I doubt very much whether some of my former colleagues would be in the room today, because many of them would actually lose their seats. Well, we all make mistakes. We all make mistakes. And when we make mistakes, we should hold our hands up and say, sorry. And wherever I go in this country, and I travel a lot around this country every week, I get people saying to me that they're sorry. Sorry for voting Labour at the last general election. And they will never vote Labour again. They wish they could turn the clock back and vote for a different party. Normally, Reform UK. Did I do? I will give way, yeah.
He talks about being sorry. I mean, so many people across the country voted Reform in local council elections on the basis that council tax was either going to be no increase or perhaps even cut. Now they're faced with rises at the very limit of what's legally possible. Is he sorry for that?
The answer. Honourable gentleman, I'll just correct him slightly on that, Sir Edward. Nowhere in our literature, in our national literature, did anybody promise to cut council tax anywhere in the country. So he may want to just correct himself on that. But anyway, I get apologists apologising for voting Labour, and sometimes I get some people saying, you know, the odd lunatic might say they're going to vote for the Green Party. I get that. They're usually recaptured very quickly. But there is a glimmer of hope, Sir Edward, at the next general election, because this lot over here, they'll all be looking for jobs. But, of course, most of them, looking at them, are unemployable now. Absolutely unemployable, unless they fancy a job as a bailiff. Because, let's face it, all they've done over the last few years, 18 months, is gone into people's houses and take stuff off them, usually money from people's pockets. Absolutely disgraceful. They can shake their heads and grin if they want. They will not be forgiven, mark my words. Just imagine their next job interview when they're down at the job centre in a couple of years' time. And the interviewer, the advisor, says, what have you been doing for the past couple of years? Well, I can sum up their achievements already. For the past few years, they worked for an awful dictator. And under his leadership, we have illegal migration totally out of control. Our streets are filling up with criminals. And if you live in Birmingham, it's filling up with rubbish as well. We've got rats the size of small dogs roaming around Birmingham, feasting on tons of rubbish. They've closed pubs and restaurants. They've put 100,000 people who work in the hospitality industry on the dole. They've stolen... I'll give way, yeah.
I'm very grateful. I agree with his points on the hospitality industry, how difficult that is right now. But just back to the point in terms of the promises at the May elections, last May elections, in terms of his party's commitment. I've got a leaflet in front of me with his party leader on there, which was for the May elections, which says we're going to reduce waste and cut your taxes. I would be the first person to admit governing is more difficult than it looks from the outside. But does he agree that set unreasonable expectations among the electorate for those May elections last year?
Yeah. I thank the honourable member for his intervention. Nowhere on the leaflet did it say he's going to cut council taxes, so maybe he should read the leaflet again, and maybe, yes. This government, Sir Edward, have stolen money off the workers by not increasing the income tax threshold, something they promised they would do. And they've given this money to the shirkers. And by the shirkers, I mean these are able-bodied people. They're bone idle, basically. They not go to work. They refuse to go to work. In fact, they stay at home all day and sponge off the state. And they're shaking their heads. In fact, the only work some of these shirkers do is probably go out once every 5 years and deliver leaflets for this lot. It's great work if you can get it. Our farmers have been attacked. Our pensioners have been robbed. and we've been locking people up for social media posts. And let's not forget puberty blockers. These are medical trials on children. And everyone over there who supports this should hang their heads in shame. They're ending the automatic right to trial by jury. Shameful. They allow Islamist thugs to dictate police policy on the streets of Birmingham. They've turned a blind eye to Islamists threatening to kill Jews on the streets of London. And they voted against having a national inquiry into the mass rape of young girls in Labour-controlled areas. Absolutely shameful. Each one of you should be absolutely ashamed of yourself.
If he's genuinely concerned about the rights of the children of this country, is he going to support cracking down hard on Elon Musk and X?
I thank the honourable gentleman for his intervention. Yeah, I thank the honourable gentleman for his intervention. I think X has got to clean its act up. It's as simple. I think we all agree with that. But it's interesting, Sir Edward. All these Labour MPs are complaining about X, but they're all on X every day making silly comments. You couldn't make it up. If they've got any sort of scruples or backbone, you'd all come off X, but I suspect not one of them will. They'll carry on. Let's not forget. Yeah.
How much money did you make from X last year?
I'm not quite sure. I make about 400 quid a month from being on X. Not exactly the gotcha sort of question or answer you expected from the honourable. Yeah, I make no bones about it. I make money from X, and also the money I make, I pay about 45% tax on it, so it goes to the Treasury. Let's not forget another flagship scheme of the party opposite, which is building brand new social housing for illegal migrants that come over the channel. Meanwhile, we've got 1 million Brits stuck on the council house waiting list. But anybody who calls this out, who disagrees with that lot over there, Sir Edward, they're labelled as far-right racists. Now, it would be fair to say that every family in this country has been affected by this Labour government, but not in a good way. And we've all had enough on it. We're fed up to the back teeth of them. Let's discuss the Cabinet. Start with the Prime Minister. His first instinct is to prioritise foreign judges over British people. We've got an Attorney General who agrees that with the ECHR when they block foreign rapists and murderers from being deported. We've got a Chancellor who doesn't understand the first thing about economic growth. We've got an Energy Secretary who's killing our manufacturing sector with his net zero madness. We've got an Education Secretary who says nothing about the radicalisation by left-wing teachers on our children. We've got a Justice Secretary who once said that Brexiteers were worse than Nazis. Mind you, that's not the daftest thing. He said, just go on YouTube and have a look at his contributions on Mastermind. Hilarious. We're the Foreign Secretary who's giving away British sovereign territory and making us pay billions of pounds for the privilege. And we've got a Health Secretary who is ploughing ahead with giving children life-destroying hormone blockers. But worst of all, as a result of this government, we have got radical Islamists, former Labour voters and some politicians waiting in the wings, ready to stand for Parliament at the next election in once-safe Labour seats. And most of you in this room are going to go. You'll be on the dole. Thank you, Sir Edward.
Right. For a calming speech, Peter Prinsley.
Thank you, Sir Edward. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship. You know, it's lovely to see so many honourable members opposite. It's unusual in a Westminster Hall debate, as I recall. Now I'm a new politician, but I do like elections. I like them very much, especially if I can talk about the health service. I like talking about the hospitals, about the plans we have for our hospitals, about getting the waiting lists down. I like talking about the plans we've got for neighbourhood health centres and the plans we've got for revolutionising the IT. And I also talk up for research. But I don't think now is the right time for a general election. Because as the Health Secretary is fond of saying, although much has been done, there is much still to do. So I am sure that we will see great changes as we bring the public with us and we renew the NHS, as is our sacred duty. Now, I am an optimist, unlike the member opposite. Now, some will say that we are U-turners. But I say that we're a government that listens. We listen. We listen to my constituent, Roxy Marjoram of the One Bull, Bury St Edmunds, who met the Chancellor of the Exchequer and then wrote her a personal letter about the difficulties of the rate revaluation for the pubs. And I do understand that we will see some reversal of that. Or the farmers that I met just a few minutes ago in the lobby, farmers from Suffolk, who told me they were so happy with what the Prime Minister had said to increase the thresholds for the inheritance tax. So this is a government that does listen. Now some members opposite, perhaps, have been critical of the Prime Minister, and they say that he perhaps lacks vision. Now, I'm not sure quite what they mean by that. I say that he's the right man at the right time. Now, Mr. Boris Johnson, who you may remember, was previously described as a man with the wrong set of talents for his particular crisis. Now Sir Keir Starmer, I believe, is exactly the opposite. The world at the moment, the situation in the world is as hazardous as any of us can recall. Now, but I recall the man in a dinner jacket who I met at a dinner, a black-tie dinner, just a few weeks ago. He told me he's the chairman of a local Conservative association. He just wanted to tell me that as the world is at the moment, he believes that the Prime Minister is doing a completely brilliant job. And I believe that also to be the case. So let's not have a general election right now. My honourable friends opposite know very well that we mustn't have a general election. Thank you, Sir Edward.
Robbie Moore.
Thank you, and it is a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And can I thank my honourable friend for Berwickshire, Roxburgh and Selkirk for opening this debate on behalf of the Petitions Committee, in which well over 1 million signatories signed this, a good proportion of which, Sir Edward, are from Keighley and Ilkley in my constituency. And they want me to speak on their behalf and make sure the point is reiterated that this debate is actually fundamentally about trust. Why? Because trust matters between that relationship between constituents and their MPs, but also with the government of the day. And let's take us back to the last general election, in which many Labour members were knocking on doors in my constituency, promising change, promising that they, if they were lucky enough to get into government, would not rise taxes on hard-working people, would not raise a penny on council tax, would return to a politics of service, and ultimately would deliver a strategy that was aligned to their manifesto. And what have we seen, Sir Edward? We've seen taxes rising on working people. We've seen council tax in my constituency alone raise by 14.99% in the last 2 years under Labour-run Bradford Council. Council tax, Sir Edward, increasing on hard-working people. We've seen portrayals, we've seen U-turns, and I will go into a few of those, because ultimately that is why this petition has had so many people signing, over 1 million people, because that illustrates the level of frustration that is out there amongst the wider population. And Sir Edward, we know that this is the second petition that the Petitions Committee has considered on this issue. So let's start with those portrayals. We've seen our farmers, our many family businesses impacted by choices that this Labour government had made, choices of which were not raised or indicated that there would be any change before the general election. Inheritance tax challenges on our agricultural property relief and business property relief. And it had taken 14 months, Sir Edward, of huge amounts of anxiety, huge amounts of frustration amongst our farming community and our family businesses that are now going to be exposed to an IHT liability of 20% over and above a raised threshold of 2.5 million, a rise that only took place at the 11th hour, 3 days before Christmas, after 14 months of many of those farmers, many of those family businesses raising their concerns. And what did we see, Sir Edward? Labour MP after Labour MP go through the voting lobbies, backing the Prime Minister and the Chancellor's ambitions to increase tax on many of our hard-working farmers. And it only was one Labour MP, Sir Edward, that had the courage, the backbone, to stand on behalf of his constituents and tell the Chancellor that he did not agree with her proposals and the Prime Minister's proposals. All of those family businesses are being impacted by those IHT changes, whether you run a hospitality sector, a brewery, a manufacturing business, an engineering business. And Sir Edward, I was with one of those businesses in my constituency who make furniture, who had worked out and calculated that their BPR liability was already about 800,000. They employ 250 people in Keighley, and they are going to be directly impacted by this Labour government. And dare I say, this is something that they said that they wouldn't even do, and it wasn't included in their manifesto. Betrayal that this Labour government has rolled out. And then, of course, so there is the... I will give way, yeah.
I know that he's been a steadfast voice for the defence of the Ukrainian people. So would he agree with me that actually the biggest betrayal of all has been Nathan Gill, the former Reform leader in Wales, taking money from a foreign power? Doesn't he agree that that has been the biggest betrayal that this country has seen when it comes to our politicians?
Well, I have to confess, Sir Edward, I am not aligned with the detail on that case. But what I do understand is that the honourable member who represents York Outer, a very rural constituency, and I believe sits on one of the key APPG groups for food security, was one of those Labour MPs that voted against the changes that we on this side of the House were advocating for changing to inheritance tax. I'm sure that his farmers and many of his family businesses in his constituency will feel a huge amount of frustration that he wasn't one of those MPs that stood on the side of our hard-working businesses, our hard-working farmers. And then there's our pub industry, Sir Edward, that are now facing a huge level of business rate rises, employers' national insurance that is rising, all hitting many of those hard-working businesses within the hospitality sector and our pub industry. No wonder it is very difficult for a Labour MP to gain a pint at the moment in those pubs that they have quite rightly been asked not to return to. And of course, employers' national insurance is hitting all businesses. That, of course, is why I've had many a conversation with our hard-working teachers, our hard-working head teachers, that are saying to me on a regular basis they are now having to make the tough choices about making teaching assistants redundant. Why? Because of the rise in employers' national insurance. And the central grant that comes out from central government that covers that rise only covers about 70% of the increase in the cost. So therefore, the additional 30% is having to be covered by that existing school budget. And then there's this narrative around free school meals and breakfast clubs. But who's paying for that, Sir Edward? The schools themselves out of their existing school budget. So if Labour MPs want to roll out this narrative that all of this benefit is going to be received by many of our constituents, or benefits, of course, that we want to see happen, they must get to grips with the facts of the case. That is those hard-working schools, those hard-working hospices that now can't provide that end-of-life care, or the schools that want to roll out that education because they are now having to make the tough choices around paying increased levels of employers' national insurance. Again, a betrayal, Sir Edward, that was not rolled out, that was going to be rolled out as part of the manifesto. And I will give way.
Does the member agree with me that... Thank you. Would the member agree with me that children deserve to be fed? Would the member agree with me that raising national insurance contributions to pay into public services, to free up the resource, to introduce breakfast clubs, to feed young children, many of whom are in poverty due to Tory policies, do you not agree that children agree to be fed?
Well, obviously, I agree that children need to be fed, but what I would gently say to the honourable member is be honest with the public. The Prime Minister promised before the general election that hard-working people would not be taxed. And then what's rolled out? Rise in employers' national insurance. It's very much those organisations that provide public service, our councils, our hospices, our hospitals, our GP practices, our schools, that are all being impacted impacted by the rise in employers' national insurance, and their budgets have not increased at the rate in which those taxes have increased. Therefore, the level of service that they are able to roll out is diminished as a result of this Labour government. So, Sir Edward, speaking to many of my constituents on the doorstep, what angers them the most and why they have signed this petition is they have been dubbed by this government through promises that did not come through and, dare I say, a strategy that has been rolling out of things that were not within the manifesto. And then it follows on with the U-turns. Crikey, what have we seen this year alone? Inheritance tax changes on our farmers being rolled out on our small businesses. Yes, the relief has increased, but it nowhere goes near far enough. We on this side of the House believe that the family farm tax and the family business tax should be axed, not just tweaking around with the threshold. And then, of course, Sir Edward, there's the statutory inquiry into grooming gangs. Now, let's rewind back. A year ago, the Home Secretary, or the then Home Secretary, stood at the dispatch box and said that we were going to be having 5 local inquiries into grooming gangs. And yet, every Labour MP voted against having a national inquiry into grooming gangs. And it was only as a result of a continued campaign on this side of the House and by many of those victims and survivors that rolled out a continued narrative that we must have a national inquiry. And a year later, the government was brought to the House, dragged to the House to say that we'll be having a national inquiry. And I will give way to the Honourable Member.
Honourable Member for giving way is most generous with his time. Could he please explain to the Chamber why he thinks that the Labour MPs opposite were so against voting for a national inquiry?
Well, we've not only seen it, Sir Edward, at a national level, but we have seen the very same strategy roll out across Labour-run Bradford Council, where a motion by the Conservative group was put before the Council, urging the Council to vote for having a national inquiry. And what did the Labour councillors on Labour-run Bradford Council do? Voted against that motion. And this just gets to the nub of the issue, because this shouldn't be about politics. This should be about the difference between right and wrong. And that is why, again, I feel there has been so many people sign this petition, because yet again this Labour government has been dragged to the dispatch box, Home Secretary after Home Secretary, to carry out a further U-turn. And I will give way to the Honourable Member.
I do thank you for giving way, Sir Edward. It's great to hear what's happening in Conservative council groups across the country in terms of the rate guy inquiry. What did his government do over the last 14 years?
Didn't implement the recommendations.
Well, on the grooming issue, the Grooming Gangs Task Force was rolled out, but I, as an individual, have been very clear in the ICSA recommendations, which was set out under the Home Secretary at the time, Theresa May, provided a huge number of recommendations. Recommendations that I have always advocated need to be put into full. But let's look at the timing on this, because when those 14 recommendations came out in 2022, if you look since the last general election took place, none of those recommendations have been rolled out in full under this Labour government. So I ask the honourable gentleman, why is it that now the same amount of time has taken place since the last ICSA report was carried out, a very detailed report by Professor Alexis Jay, and this Labour government has not implemented in full all, or indeed one, of those ICSA recommendations, and the same amount of time has now gone past since the last Conservative government. And that is actually shameful on this part. And then there's been further U-turns. The winter fuel allowance has changed. Our pensioners have been hugely negatively impacted by this Labour government. And then we go on to the 2-child cap benefit change, income tax. And this is a really, really important point, because those on the other side of the House, these Labour MPs will say those with the broadest shoulders need to bear the brunt of choices like the Chagos deals, what is it, £47 million, or the rollout of digital ID, £1.8 million. But who is it that is paying this bill, Sir Edward? Those basic rate income tax payers are now going to see their income tax levels go up by £220 this year. Those are not those individuals that have the broadest shoulders, but it's those hard-working people, Sir Edward, across Keighley, Ilkley, Silsden, the Worth Valley, that will be paying as a result of the disastrous decisions that this government has made in the last 18 months. And I will give way to the honourable member.
If I heard him just right, he was criticising us for the £280 tax burden faced by basic rate taxpayers because of the threshold fees in effect this year. He will, of course, know that that threshold fees was in his government's manifesto going into the general election, because it was part of their last budget settlement. Did he criticise it at the time?
Sir Edward, I do not agree at all with the basic rate income taxpayer having to pay an additional £220 this year. I do not think that the vast majority of the country, or indeed many of my constituents, voted for tax raising to take place of £64 billion over the last 2 budgets to fund things that were not even in the Labour Party's manifesto, like digital ID, like the Chagos deals, like raising employers' national insurance, which I've already indicated has had a huge impact on many of my constituents. So to sum up, Sir Edward, the reality is, in areas like Braithwaite, Brackenbank, Oxenhope, Haworth, Stanbury, Oakworth, in my constituency, indeed right across the country, people were promised one thing and quite clearly got another. They've seen chaos, they've seen U-turns, and most of all, the effect of Labour's policies are hitting those most hard-working people across my constituency. So the message is, Sir Edward, to the government is this: get a grip and start delivering for those hard-working people, because be in no doubt, the public will not forgive and they will not forget.
Order. I just remind colleagues that the focus of this debate is not a general critique of the government or indeed a general defence of the government. The focus of this debate is on whether or not there should be a general election, and I call Amanda Martin.
Thank you, Sir Edward. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship. I want to thank the Petitions Committee for this debate and those who engaged and signed it. I, like my honourable friend from Cannock Chase, always look at the petitions that come into this place, as it's a way for the public to raise their voice and set an agenda for this place. And like him, I can also understand why people did sign, and I'll address that today, because like my honourable friend from Hitchin, I too am concerned about the rise of public mistrust and not trusting in our politics and politicians, be that local, national, or the concerns of the ability feel that politicians can make positive change. Let me be clear, though, another general election is not the answer today. People want long-term development and delivery and not political games. And when I think about, we've now been in for 18 months into this Parliament and we inherited a mess, and I like to think about it in a pictorial way of a really desolated, broken kitchen. The plates are piled high, some are smashed on the floor, there's empty food, and some of the cupboards, the doors are falling off, and some are empty. The justice cupboard, though, was overflowing with victims waiting for their day in court. The education cupboard was empty because it was felt neglected, because it was just a lose, lose, lose to try and fix anything. The growth cupboard was abandoned. The NHS cupboard, well, that's just fallen apart and is laying on the floor. The defence cupboard, the bottle is open and the liquid is spinning down and down onto the floor as people and contracts were left. We inherited a mess. And worst of all, the child poverty cupboard was empty, as were many kids' stomachs. We have been in for 18 months and we inherited a mess. 14 years of Conservative failure have hollowed out our public services. The Conservative Lib Dem coalition lit that fuse, and the years after did the damage. Cities like Portsmouth paid the price. Communities, families and individuals absorbed the shock, while those responsible simply walked away. Those involved do not get to pretend that this was not their doing. Those opposite should reflect on their role and not just brush it aside. Then there is Reform, a party of grievance, not government, propped up by failing Conservatives who keep joining, who could not win honestly, so they've changed their logo instead. They are not fighting for Portsmouth or Britain. They are fighting for relevance, and many of my constituents can see through this. Sir Edward, I am not a commentator. I represent and serve my city. Before I came into this House, I spent 24 years as a teacher in Portsmouth, one of the most trusted professions in the country. I worked with children, families and school staff every day, and I saw how bad decisions in Westminster landed in real lives. And it's indeed the reason I came into politics, because in my opinion, the previous government trashed primary education and gave up on our young people. That experience, as well as seeing my own friends and family suffer, shapes everything I do in this place. Progress must be practical, fair and deliverable, or it's meaningless. I represent Portsmouth. I live and have lived its challenges. Since being elected, I've spoken over 170 times in this place for my place. My team and I have closed more than 9,000 constituency cases. And in visiting schools, businesses, charities and community groups, week in and week out, From brownies to breweries to bubble tea to boxing clubs, this is what service looks like. And sometimes, Sir Edward, there are tough conversations and there are real difficulties. But because we focus on delivering change, it is happening, but positive change takes time. However, the two-child limit on universal credit is being removed and helping 2,460 local children. 60% of those, their families are working. Breakfast clubs are feeding children for free before schools. Youth hubs are opening. Children are being protected from online harms. School uniform costs are falling. Wages are rising. Renters and workers' rights are improving as we scrap exploitative zero-hours contracts and Section 21 no-fault evictions. NH waiting times are coming down, whilst GP capacity is expanding and dental access is being tackled. And for the first time ever, violence against women and girls is being addressed. And men's health.
I'm grateful. The Honourable Lady is giving a list of her government's achievements in Portsmouth North. Youth unemployment is in her constituency. We should add that to the list as well.
We'll add it to the list, and we need to make sure that those children and young people in need are not neglected by this government, and they won't be. Men's health is finally being taken seriously. There is money for potholes, parks and policing. And Pride in Place funding is reaching deprived and previously ignored communities, like where my mum and dad were born, in Paulsgrove and beyond. And many of these policies, the opposition voted against. And if they'd been in government, we wouldn't have had them. Portsmouth is also a Royal Naval city, and I'm proud my son serves, and I'm proud this government is delivering the biggest armed forces pay rise in decades. Service families' homes are improving, families can keep pets now, and veterans are proper joined up support through Op Valour. There's delivery and not slogans for our armed forces. Brexit hurt Pompey businesses. That damage was real. We now need, and we are rebuilding, trade and trust. The India trade agreement alone will bring £300 million a year into the South East, and investment in defence and apprenticeships is helping to make life more stable for those young people who are out of employment. For many in our city, it's a far cry away from the days when shipbuilding was snatched from the previous government and replaced with 3 useless Portsmouth ministers. Portsmouth is receiving £13.1 million for safer streets, cleaner streets, improving bus services, better cycling and vital flood defences for our island city, to name just a few. I'm also especially proud of my own tool theft campaign, which I led a movement of local tradespeople and national bodies. And despite recent noises from the opposition benches, before I was elected, politicians ignored this crime and, in fact, this sector. But tool theft destroys lives, and we know that the trade sector builds homes. We work with the sector, we change the law, and that is what happens when you listen and act in government. But do we have more to do? Absolutely, Sir Edward, we do. Always. But in the last 18 months, I and we as a government have listened, learned and delivered. Change works when it's built with communities, not imposed on them. That is why calls for an immediate general election ring hollow. Accountability matters, and chaos does not. My constituents, though, know life is hard, but they also know who is showing up and who is shouting from the sidelines. The country does not need more noise. It needs people who serve where they live, take responsibility and get on with the job. And I want to thank those residents of Portsmouth North who signed this petition and assure you that my door is open, always open. I understand the frustration, the anger, but I encourage them to come along to the coffee mornings, join me for one of my pint with your MPs, or attend one of my many public events. I'm here to listen and help and to deliver for Portsmouth North because it's never been delivered for in the last 2 decades. Today and tomorrow, as long as I am here in this place, it's important for me to do that. Everybody I love lives in my city. Petitions are a really important part of our democracy, and this debate will not build a single home, it will not fix a single struggling public service or help a single family in my city. My focus is delivery, not disruption. I serve Portsmouth and will keep doing this job. We have far more in common than what divides us.
Matt Vickers.
Thank you, Sir Edward. It is a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. This Labour government came to office on the back of so many promises, and more than 1 million people have signed this petition because so many of those promises have been broken. Labour promised our farmers they'd protect British agriculture, but they slammed them with the family farm tax, threatening food prices, threatening food security and causing misery for families who farmed for generations. Labour said it wanted to help Britain's high streets and small businesses, but battered them with the jobs tax, hiking up business rates and slashing reliefs. Pensioners were promised security and support, but had their winter fuel allowance ripped from their hand, were forced to sit in the cold making the decision between heating and eating. Labour promised to cut energy bills by £300, yet the average family is now paying almost £200 more. Labour promised us more police and PCSOs on our streets. Instead, we've seen cuts to police numbers, prisoners released early. We're now looking at an end to jury trials, and police chiefs are telling us about a funding shortfall of £500 million. Labour promised to end the use of asylum hotels. But now we've seen the number in hotels actually rise, and the number arriving illegally in the country has gone up, not just by a bit, by 50%. And of those who've arrived legally, less of them are now being deported. The Prime Minister promised every council taxpayer in the land not a penny more on council tax. Yet council tax is on the up. In fact, taxes are on the up, left, right and centre, and have reached a record high. Under this government, those who work are paying more and more in tax. Those who don't are getting more and more in benefits. And then there's the one thing in particular that didn't feature at all in the manifesto that looks to be set and paused. I will.
When it refers to people who are not in work getting more and more from the state, is he talking about our increase the state pension?
Talking about the huge, well, we're talking about the end, with the end to the two-child cap, the ever-increasing amount spent on benefits in this country, while hard-working people, the guys who get up early, who go out and graft all day, are paying more and more in tax. It's simply not fair. Yeah, then there's the one thing that wasn't in the manifesto, one of many actually, digital ID. We don't want it, we don't need it, and nobody voted for it. It fundamentally changes the relationship between citizen and state, and this government has no mandate to do it.
I thank the honourable member for giving me very generous with his time. He talks about pledges that weren't made in the manifesto. I can think of 3 that weren't made in the manifesto. That's a deputy PM had to resign for tax dodging. We had a homeless minister had to resign for making people homeless. And an anti-corruption minister had to resign over corruption. Does he think that should have been in the manifesto?
Well, I think he promised us, didn't he, the Prime Minister promised us that we're going to be whiter and white, a new start for politics, in the service of working people, one scandal after another, entirely appalling. But there is one thing that Labour MPs and the Prime Minister promised everybody that stands out. They promised change. Well, boy, have we got change. But it's not the change anybody voted for. The last government left this country with the fastest growing economy in the G7. But under this government, we're below the G7 average. Growth has limped along at rates so weak that monthly GDP has slipped into contraction. This is not the growth that Labour promised. It's living standards being squeezed and promises unfulfilled. The only place we're seeing any real growth under this government is in the size of our national debt. Unemployment is up 21%. Yes, that's 21% more people without the security of a pay packet, families without the cash they need, having to make tough decisions, unable to fulfil their aspirations. Virtually every Labour government in history has left office with more people out of work. This one is set to do it in record time. Nowhere is this seen more starkly than in the hospitality sector. Yes, hospitality sector faced tough times in a tough environment in which they operate. But under the last government, 18,000 jobs were created in the sector. As a result of this government and the choices that are made in number 10, 111,000 jobs have been lost. And 2 hospitality businesses are closing every day. This is the youngster getting their first job. It's the people who set up that small business, who work day and night to create jobs and deliver economic growth. The jobs tax, rocketing business rates and the Employment Rights Bill have real consequences. They're costing jobs, increasing prices and sending businesses fleeing. I agree with the Honourable Member for Berwickshire, Roxburgh and Selkirk when he says that the word that comes up on the doorstep time and time again is betrayal. People feel totally and utterly betrayed by this Labour government, and Labour members should ask themselves why. This Labour government is riddled with scandal and chaos. They've broken pretty much every single promise they made to the British people. People have had enough. This isn't the change anyone voted for. Our great country deserves better.
Jim Dixon.
Thank you, Dr Hook. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship, and I would like to welcome this debate and particularly say that my comments tonight are very much directed at everyone in Dartford who signed this petition and all others in my wonderful constituency, that it's a privilege to serve in this place. Ahead of the election in July 2024, this country was crying out for change, and Dartford was no different. But I recognise there is now an expectation that this change gets delivered as quickly as possible, and we know that delivering real change isn't easy, it takes time, but in my view, if I look around my constituency, it is happening. And with around 3 years left until a likely general election, I just wanted to use this moment to take stock briefly of what I said in Dartford that I would prioritise before the 2024 election and where progress is being made. Dartford is one of the fastest growing towns in the UK with lots of new homes being built, and I very much welcome the new families who are making a great contribution to Dartford alongside our wonderful, hard-working existing communities. But they know, Dr Hook, that although over the last 15 years the population has expanded, that there has been very little spent on increasing the local infrastructure, the roads, the health provision to meet this growing population, which really shouldn't have come as a surprise either to local government representatives or to national government representatives. So on NHS provision, I promised in partnership with the government that we would make progress, and since the election we are seeing this. The expanded Community Diagnostic Centre at the Livingston Community Hospital site and the funding for a new intensive care unit at Darrant Valley Hospital that will add crucial capacity elsewhere on the site. Waiting lists are coming down, but we have much more to do, and that's what I say to Dartford residents who signed this petition, particularly on GP capacity across Swanscombe and Ebbsfleet, where the pressure on appointments is most acute. I recently visited Swanscombe Health Centre, amongst the busiest in Kent. They've added 11,000 patients to their role in the last 5 years as a result of our growing community, and they desperately need infrastructure investment to meet that growing need. Despite the fact that community infrastructure levy is being spent on increased provision, this part of my constituency would be ideal for one of the new wave of neighbourhood health centres being planned by ministers at the Department of Health, and I hope to make this case robustly in the months ahead. If we have an election, it will be difficult to do that. One of the other key issues for Dartford on which I stood at the general election is that the town is regularly gridlocked by terrible traffic. And my plan that I put before residents at the election was to get Dartford moving again in partnership with this government. We said we would invest in infrastructure, and we've had some hugely positive news on the Lower Thames crossing, which will reduce congestion at the Dartford crossing and make residents in Dartford's lives freer of terrible air and the congestion that they see every day. Government funding is now in place and planning has been given for the Lower Thames crossing, and we're at the start of a procurement process for the machinery needed to dig under the River Thames and create that new crossing. I'm eagerly awaiting news from the government on the next steps on the private finance package that needs to be put in place in order to make the scheme work, and I'm anxious to see spades in the ground in the near future under this government. One of the crucial projects to get Dartford moving again is the repair of Galley Hill Road, which collapsed in early 2023, almost 3 years ago now, cutting a crucial route between my constituency and that of my friend and neighbour, the member for Gravesham. This road closure has led to an increase in traffic, in particular heavy goods vehicles passing through roads in Swanscombe that cannot accommodate them. It's been a disaster for that local community. After the general election in 2024, I am pleased that it was a visit to this site by the ministers in the Department for Transport that inspired the government to create the Structures Fund announced at the spending review last year. This fund is designed specifically to repair rundown transport infrastructure like Galley Hill Road, and I have no doubt that without the last general election result that such a Structures Fund wouldn't have been in place. With details on the fund to come in the months ahead, it will be on Kent County Council to put in place the best possible bid to the fund that has the chance to finally get Galley Hill Road fixed and an end to the chaos in Swanscombe's roads and for its communities once and for all. The final topic that I campaigned hard on at the general election, and I believe the government is making a very significant difference on, is the government's steps to restore neighbourhood policing. Each neighbourhood across Dartford is unique and it is crucial that we rebuild relationships between communities and the police officers there to keep them safe. The Neighbourhood Policing Guarantee, a key item in the manifesto of 2024, introduced by the government last year, will put this into action alongside 13,000 additional police officers, PCSOs and special constables that we're putting into neighbourhood policing roles. And we are already seeing more police in Dartford. I'm very happy to give Ray.
I'm pleased to hear the Honourable Member is running through his campaign literature, but can I just ask the Honourable Member, does he think it's right that a basic rate income taxpayer in his constituency of Dartford is now paying an additional £220 this year to fund things like the rollout of digital ID that wasn't in the Labour Party's manifesto, or the things like the Chagos deal, £47 billion? Does he think that's the right thing to do for hard-working constituents in his constituency of Dartford?
Jim Dixon.
Thank you very much to the honourable gentleman for his intervention. The residents in Dartford who voted for me wanted to see these things that I'm talking about us having delivered. Infrastructure to improve their roads, a better NHS, additions to their local hospital, and the police on the streets that I'm talking about and that they're appreciating as we rebuild the relationship between the police in Dartford and local residents. So I've been particularly pleased to be able to meet officers across Dartford and the villages over the last 18 months, and I want to put on record my thanks for all they do. We've got much more to do, particularly to ensure that police have the powers they need to tackle a troubling trend I have discovered in my constituency of catapults being used and across Kent more broadly to target wildlife and people. And I'm glad, again, demonstrating that this is a government that listens, that ministers at the Home Office and DEFRA, yes, I'm happy to give way.
Does the member know how many people have been put out of work in Dartford as a result of this government's actions?
Jim Dixon.
Not very many, and actually Dartford is in receipt of significant extra additional infrastructure spending, which is putting people into work. And for instance, an example of how young people are going to be in work in Dartford into the future is that I'm still responding to the last intervention, actually. Dartford is lucky that North Kent College in Dartford is the recipient of one of 10 National Centre of Excellence Awards for construction across the country, and Dartford will be the southeast centre, allowing young people to get into jobs as infrastructure spend takes place in the constituency. I'm happy to give way.
I'm grateful to the honourable member for giving me. My intention of my intervention was to be helpful, because the unemployment rate amongst young people in Dartford is up 11% in the last year as a direct consequence of decisions that his ministers and his government are making. What does he say to those young people who are having those job opportunities taken away from them?
Jim Dixon.
Can I thank the honourable gentleman for his intervention? I say, look at the additional spending going into Dartford to create jobs, and look at the Connect to Work project. Look at the Connect to Work project set up by the Department of Work and Pensions, which is helping young people who are a long way from the labour market into good, well-paid jobs. We clearly have much more to do to ensure that, that we have the police we need in Dartford. I feel very confident that people in Dartford feel safer and will continue to do so as long as we don't have a general election to see those changes lost. Finally, honourable members may know, and this is something personal and that I'm proud of, that I was contacted by the family of Simone White, who tragically died of methanol poisoning in Laos late last year. It's been an honour to work with Simone's family and the families of other victims of methanol poisoning for greater awareness of the risks. And this is why I think it's important we have a government who listens, because I am pleased as a result of their campaigning work that the curriculum is now being changed to add the risk of poisoning from methanol abroad to the curriculum and the teaching about the hazards people can encounter when travelling, and that the Foreign Office has been working with the families to update their advice. These changes made are a testament to the courage and campaigning of the victims' families, but also of a government that listens. So since the election, we have made progress on crucial issues, with more to come in the years ahead, and I look forward to working with Dartford residents, our vibrant community groups, our faith groups and our businesses to keep driving positive changes in our area. And this is what I say to people in Dartford who have signed the petition. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Lillian Jones.
It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. After only 18 months in office, this UK Labour government has taken decisions that has ended Tory austerity and delivered the largest block grant to Scotland since devolution. 50 billion after years of Tory underinvestment. 50 billion is welcome for Scotland's vital public services, schools, hospitals and local councils whose budgets have been cut to the bone. The other decisions taken by this Labour government will lift 95,000 Scots children out of poverty, and that's helping 2,097 children in my constituency of Kilmarnock and Loudon. And after this Parliament, 500,000 children across the UK will be lifted out of poverty. Now that makes me burst with pride. This is the reason that I'm in politics. We've raised the minimum wage, meaning 200,000 Scots got a pay rise, and we've delivered the Workers' Rights Act, protecting workers, strengthening their rights, banning zero-hours contracts and ending fire and rehire. And the £42 million investment confirmed for Kilmarnock and Loudon for infrastructure, regeneration and civic pride. That's Labour delivering for our communities. And the hundreds of miners in Kilmarnock and Loudon who finally get justice too, BCSS pensioners and the Mine Workers Pension Scheme members who have seen uplifts of 41% and 32% to their pensions. And it was their money, and I'm proud that this Labour government finally gave justice to them. And we're coming after COVID frosters too. Under this government, we will get taxpayers' money back. And Labour has introduced a mansion tax and an online gambling tax, standing up to big tech firm platforms. Because free speech does not mean the freedom to abuse, exploit or degrade women and girls, though Reform may disagree. The economy has been stabilised, 6 interest rate cuts saving businesses in my constituency thousands of pounds, making mortgages cheaper for homeowners, another manifesto commitment delivered. Now, we've delivered trade deals with Australia, India and the US, protecting 150,000 jobs, including thousands in the Scotch whisky industry, and we're giving opportunity back to our young people by securing UK's return to the Erasmus Plus scheme. These are just a few of our achievements after only 18 months, but there's much, much more to do. This government is in the service of the British people, and I will continue to work hard and deliver for all in Kilmarnock and Loudon.
And last of the backbenchers, Dr Scott Arthur.
Thank you, Dr Huck. What a pleasure it is to serve under you today, and I do thank the member for Berwickshire, Roxburgh and Selkirk for introducing the debate, although I do think it was a little bit glass half empty when assessing the government's record. If we look at the challenges facing the government today, one of them is the fact that our bond rate remains high when it comes to borrowing because of that calamitous budget set by Liz Truss. It showed the world that we were capable of making horrendously bad decisions, and that also impacts on our ability to attract investment to the UK. So whilst I support the idea of a recall petition for MPs, I do think a recall petition for whole governments would just further weaken confidence in us as a country. But I do understand the sentiment of the people, particularly people from Edinburgh South West, who signed this petition. Many of them would have started their first job or perhaps got married around the financial crisis back in 2008, and that would have impacted on their ability to move on in life. Some of them would have felt the impact of Brexit, a huge financial disruptor in the UK, and again, that would have affected their life chances. Both these things are a once-in-a-generation event, but right in the middle of that, we had a once-in-a-century event, the COVID pandemic. So there's a lot of people in the UK just right now who've just not had a fair chance to get on in life. And that really does leave them feeling frustrated. Then along come parties who are keen to sow division. They don't offer answers. All they do is amplify that feeling of mistrust and the feeling of being left behind. And we heard that from the member from Ashfield. A long list of things that he thinks are wrong with the country, but not a single solution other than misleading leaflets. And this is something I talked about when I was touring schools in my constituency as part of Parliament Week last year. Children in the classrooms, in the modern studies classes and also politics classes, asking about why politics is so divisive in the UK. Very happy to.
The honourable gentleman for giving way is most generous with his time. He's talking about divisiveness in politics, and that school children are picking up on this. I've got a school in Ashfield, Quarrydale Academy, and their Year 9 history class had they was teaching them politics, and they had a chart on the wall. And on this side it said far right Nazis. It had a picture of the honourable member for Clacton, myself, Oswald Mosley and Mussolini. Does he think that's the right way to teach our children?
This is a serious point. I mean, I would hope that teachers aren't teaching children that, because, you know, whilst I disagree with the members' politics, I don't rank them alongside some of the far-right politicians you've mentioned from our country's history. But if it's part of a school assignment, I'm sure the member will be the first to talk about freedom of speech, and children do have that right as well. But I hope that is not being taught in schools. And in fact, I'm sure it's not. But when the schools I went to, one of the things that did come up was LGBT rights. And some of them are absolutely disgusted by some of the comments that come from reform. And they were echoed earlier in this debate around the access to healthcare for people who are part of the trans community. They're absolutely disgusted by what's happening because they care, they've got friends who are faced with this, and they care about this issue passionately. So I urge him to represent everyone when he makes these comments. And so in the classrooms, one of the things I was challenged on, what did I think the government's greatest achievement was? And the thing that I am an emotional person, the thing that got me most emotional when it came to voting, was voting for better employment rights for women, making it harder for employers to sack women just because they were pregnant, just because they had a miscarriage, just because they were returning from having a baby. And I think that's something we would all support. I know some members may have voted against that, but I think we all think these are good things. And likewise, I said I was proud of the work this government was doing to lift hundreds of thousands of people out of poverty. And I said that knowing that some of the children in that very classroom will benefit from that policy. And the other children in that classroom may well know who those children are. And I'm really proud of what the government's doing in that space. Very happy to.
I'm very grateful. As you will know, in the Scottish press, there's wide speculation about a plot from Scottish Labour MPs to bring down the Prime Minister. Labour MPs quoted as describing the Prime Minister as terrible, incompetent, mind-blowingly stupid. We're going to get slaughtered in the Scottish Parliament elections. Is the honourable member part of this plot?
Scott Arthur.
Absolutely not, and these are not comments. These are not comments I'm familiar with at all. I mean, I would advise them not to focus on newspaper speculation and focus on supporting his constituents.
Worry about your own leadership.
And you know, and the young people in the school, I was talking to them about how this is a government that takes our international treaties on both climate and human rights seriously as well, and they value that. And of course, with them, Dr. Huck, I was talking about the plans to extend the voting age for general elections in Scotland to 16. Other elections in Scotland, young voters can already vote at 16. Very happy to.
Just before the honourable member moves on talking about the Employment Rights Bill, does he recognise the level of frustration that there is out there? I know my inbox has been filled from a lot of emails and correspondence from those lobby organisations representing those with disabilities or those with special educational needs that are now raising the level of frustration that the Employment Rights Bill will make it much more difficult for an employer to take a risk on giving an opportunity to those with those additional challenges or additional needs. So therefore making making that opportunity much less for those. Is he proud of that as something that the government is aiming to do with the Employment Rights Bill and not recognising those challenges?
Scott Harper.
I mean, he knows that he knows that's not the intention of the government, and he's welcome. He's very welcome to visit my constituency, and I can help him meet lots of people who already support people with additional needs into work, and they're doing fantastic work. And I'm sure whatever the government's doing is going to build on that success. I'm also proud that the government has learned from Edinburgh, and last week introduced a pavement parking ban. We'll give councils the powers across England to introduce one. Again, a great step in creating a more equal UK, and I'm also really happy with the road safety strategy, which will save thousands of lives. And of course, in Scotland, as we've already heard, we've had our biggest ever settlement. It's still a bit of a mystery to me how the Scottish Government spent that money. One of the biggest challenges, and it will have been part of the frustrations why people signed this petition, is the housing crisis we face in Edinburgh South West. And I was really disappointed that last week the Scottish Government actually voted to tax house building in the middle of a housing emergency. This is the kind of government we're faced with in Scotland. We could talk about the UK government, but people should look at the Scottish government before doing so. And I'm really proud of what my office has done in the past year, Dr Huck. Resolved 8,000 cases, accumulated £303,000 of financial gain for constituents, mostly due to my colleague Lucy in my office. And also we had a big impact on the budget. Our lobbying brought about changes to inheritance tax around inflected birth payments, and also brought reform to the Pension Protection Fund, ensuring that there was some indexation of the payments. But I do know that still cutting across everything that happens in my constituency is the cost of living crisis, and is the point about the growing youth employment, but that we have particularly in Scotland, a point raised repeatedly by the member for Berwickshire, Roxburgh and Selkirk. And I also know that immigration is a real issue. People feel that the previous government did lose control of immigration. I think we can accept that, and that the current government has to do more to bring that back under control. And I say that as someone who, my life was saved by an immigrant back in 2015. I worked in a university, so I understand the benefits of immigration, but we have to get immigration to a place where it's actually supporting this country as a whole, and I think there's some questions about that. But I just want to conclude, Dr Huck, by saying that we've used the word betrayal quite a lot in this debate, and I really, really regret the use of that word, because that word, I think, often in this debate has been used to deliberately amplify division within the country and any people listening to this debate. I think as a Parliament we do have a duty to talk much more about where we agree, much more. And I'm sure we agree the point raised earlier around improving employment rights for pregnant women, women returning from childbirth, and also women with miscarriages. And I hope that in the remainder of this Parliament we can spend more time talking about what we have in common and engaging with the electorate on that, and then perhaps we can focus on delivery rather than perhaps petitions. Thank you, Dr Huck.
First of the front benchers, Liberal Democrat spokesperson. Point of order, Harriet Baldwin.
Thank you very much, Dr Hook. Before we get into the front bench speeches, could you clarify whether it's in order for so many of the government speakers in this debate to have left the chamber before the front bench speeches in order to listen to their beleaguered Prime Minister at the Parliamentary Labour Party meeting?
They should. Right, okay. I think they've all had to ask for permission, usually when I've been in the chair in this slot, and they should return for the concluding speeches. But I think we're finishing a bit earlier than we thought, because we're already on the front benches. Usually that would be 45 minutes before the end. I can inform the Chairman of Ways and Means and get some clarification for the future, because these things are always fluid. I think it should be, usually, 6 o'clock by now, which is now 27. Anyway, look, first of our front benches, Lisa Smart.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr Hook. It really is a pleasure to serve with you in the chair. Across the country, there is a clear and growing discontent, with many expressing frustration over the way the country does, and importantly, doesn't work. Waiting times for doctors' appointments are too long. Everything is just so expensive, and more people feel like their income just doesn't stretch to the end of the month. Social care reform that we've been promised will not arrive for at least 3 years, and new hospital projects will not be completed for decades, with my own Stepping Hill Hospital not even making it onto the list, despite its £138 million repairs backlog. Business owners talk of it being harder and harder to take on and train new staff. Teachers report that they're just not equipped to deliver the education our most vulnerable children need. And councils can't stretch their budgets to do what most of us consider to be the basics, like filling the blooming potholes. It's no wonder then that this widespread dissatisfaction is directed towards the current government. And while they inherited various steaming piles of disaster from the previous shambolic Conservative government, Labour's recent backpedalling and flip-flopping is bound to test even their staunchest supporters. With pleasure.
She quite rightly refers to steaming piles of rubbish that this government has left. But for many of us, we believe that the rot really set in 2010 when the austerity programme was initiated with her party's involvement. So how many of those steaming piles of rubbish does she lay at her own party's door?
No government is perfect, but I am immensely proud and will to my dying day be immensely proud of the fact that some of my friends can get married because they're in a same-sex relationship and they weren't allowed to do so under the last Labour government. I'm immensely proud that as a school governor for 20 years, I know that the kids who need the most support get it through the pupil premium. And I'm immensely proud, actually, that it showed that grown-up consensual coalition government can work. He will know, as I'm sure he read Alistair Darling's budgetary plans in the run-up to the 2010 election, that the Labour government then planned to cut more than either the Liberal Democrats or the Conservatives. And so while I didn't agree with everything the 2010 to 15 government did, no sane person possibly could, I am really proud that we delivered what so many people wanted and needed. There is always work for every government to do. The million or so members of the public who signed this petition are calling for a change via a general election, including 1,987 of my Hazel Grove constituents. They're feeling frustrated and disappointed that this government has failed to deliver the change they promised at the 2024 election. With pleasure.
So in my constituency of Epsom Muir, over 1,500 people have signed this petition, and I hear regularly on the doorstep how disgruntled and frustrated they are. They're tired of working so hard and just barely making ends meet. And whilst the Conservatives left a complete mess, Labour just simply hasn't delivered as well. And people just aren't feeling any better off. So does my honourable friend agree that we really must grow the economy? And a great way to do that will be having a bespoke customs union with Europe.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Well, I'm delighted that I'm going to not be the first Liberal Democrat to mention a bespoke customs union with the EU later in my remarks. I strongly agree with my honourable friend on the points that she makes. I think it would be the biggest single lever the government could pull to boost growth in our economy. Recently, we've seen the government U-turn, rightly in some cases, on the family farm tax, following 14 months of calls for change from farmers, from the Lib Dems and others. This is alongside U-turns on winter fuel and benefit reform, to name just two others. And I do understand why 1 million people are underwhelmed. The government's introduced a growth-crushing jobs tax that has stretched the government's manifesto pledges not to raise income tax on working people. And as a result of this, jobs are being lost, economic growth is flatlining, and the government isn't showing a clear enough vision to get us out of this mess. And while the government now increasingly acknowledges that Brexit has been detrimental to economic growth, it has failed to take sufficiently meaningful action to address this reality, and the figures are stark. Brexit is costing British taxpayers £90 billion annually in lost tax revenue as of 2025, according to the House of Commons Library. That's billions of pounds not funding our public services. The government must move beyond merely attributing blame on Brexit and begin implementing solutions. As my honourable friend mentioned, we Liberal Democrats are urging the government to negotiate a new UK-EU customs union, which could raise more than £25 billion annually for the Exchequer. A customs union would be the most effective means of dismantling trade barriers and stimulating economic growth. We must be far more ambitious in securing the best possible arrangements for UK-EU relations, our largest trading partner. I will give way to the Liberal Democrat Europe spokesperson.
I'm very grateful. More than 1,800 of my constituents have signed the petition that has prompted today's debate, and whilst it would be arrogant for me to assume that those 1,800 people are necessarily indicating their support for an EU customs union, although I think it would be very sensible if they did, what I hear from them is that they are feeling worse off than they did yesterday, and the prospect that their children are going to be worse off tomorrow than they are today. And so they've signed this petition asking for an urgent general election. And I think the government has to reconcile this point. Unless they can deliver meaningful growth that people can actually feel, there may not be a general election tomorrow, but they will be made to pay a high political price the next time a general election comes. What are they going to do to give the UK the massive dollop of economic growth that this country needs and that our constituents need to feel?
Lisa Smart.
My honourable friend, as he always does, speaks really powerfully on these issues, and I, as I often do, agree with him wholeheartedly. This government is struggling, Dr Hook, and the official opposition looks increasingly like a mediocre turquoise tribute act. We face, though, an even more dangerous threat to our country's values and our future if the next general election delivers the results the current polls suggest. If left to their own devices, there are political forces who would move us closer to a model similar to that promoted by President Trump. One without a universal NHS, where patients face high insurance costs or are denied care altogether. One that relies on expensive fossil fuels and permits widespread fracking while climate change accelerates. And one where the government can erode basic rights and freedoms by leaving the European Convention on Human Rights. We must be clear about what this political retirement home for disgraced ex-ministers represents economically, of course. Their fiscal proposals mirror the disastrous Truss mini-budget, which their leader praised at the time. He now proposes to replicate it through massive, unfunded spending commitments supported only by vague promises of unrealistic savings. Perhaps even more troubling is the platforming of anti-vaccine conspiracy theorists and dangerous health misinformation. The leader of a UK political party has shamefully adopted Trump's approach of refusing to push back against dangerous misinformation, including false claims regarding paracetamol use during pregnancy that risk leaving expectant mothers suffering unnecessarily. This is dangerous claptrap from those seeking to win the next general election. The Liberal Democrats, Dr Hook, advocate a fundamentally different approach to how we should change our country in ways the voting public would welcome and that would leave a lasting legacy. We must fix social care if we want to stand any chance of having an NHS we can continue to be proud of. We must focus on genuinely local community engagement rather than centralised developer-led planning to get the homes, including the social homes, our communities need and our constituents deserve, with zero carbon homes as standard for all new construction. And we must reform our politics and our democracy so that the public feel their voices are being heard and that more of them get what they voted for. Now, I welcome the government's plans for the removal of hereditary peers from being able to make laws for life. And I will welcome the introduction of votes for 16 and 17-year-olds in future general elections. But this all feels a bit too timid, and the moment demands more. One of the most regrettable impacts of the government cancelling local elections in some parts of England is that it gives succour to those who seek to stoke distrust in our democracy, to those who seek to divide our communities. Trust in our politics is vital, and we all need to take steps to build it, not destroy it. Changing the way our politics works, capping donations to political parties, restoring the independence of the Electoral Commission to remove political interference in the way electoral rules are enforced, and changing the way we elect our MPs are all suggestions I make constructively to the Minister. Proportionate representation ensures that seats broadly match votes, that every voter has a meaningful say, and that governments represent the majority of the electorate. This government got roughly 1/3 of the votes in 2024 and was rewarded with roughly 2/3 of the seats and almost all of the power. Evidence shows that PR leads to higher voter turnout, more representative governments and more stable policy making. We already have PR in the UK, just not here. In Westminster, PR in different forms already is used in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, as well as in the vast majority of democracies worldwide, just not here in Westminster. It is surely reckless to maintain an electoral model that so consistently produces such wildly disproportionate groups of MPs and leaves millions of voters feeling ignored. If these
would you give way?
I'd be utterly delighted to give way.
Honourable Leader for giving way. She talks about representation and proportionality within the country and in this place. Is she aware that Reform UK got 4.1 million votes at the last election, got 5 MPs, and the Lib Dems I think got 3.7 million votes and got 72 members of Parliament. Yet the Lib Dems are allowed on every single select committee, bill committees, draft legislation committees, but Reform UK are not. Is that fair?
Lisa Smart.
I'd be genuinely delighted to talk about the many and varied ways that I'm sure he and I agree about how we could change this place. I think the way that we elect people to this place, I think there's a chance we agree, although I'm not entirely sure whether we still agree on that or not. I think people elect their MPs to come here and represent them, and that includes fair representation on select committees. I think that that should be proportionate. I think there is a risk that of a total of 650 MPs and 5 reform MPs, to maintain proportionality, it would end up with, I don't know, what would it be? 100 MPs on each committee, and I don't think that is practicable or practical. I think there are many ways he and I would agree that we should reform this place and change it for the better. Voting is due to start at some point in the near future, and we're going to be going on for many hours late tonight, as I understand it. I suspect he and I will feel as similarly about what a way to run a country that is. Voting is a good thing, of which there should be more of it. Voting at midnight by walking through a corridor for 15 minutes. I think there are other democracies in other parts of the world have found a more effective and more efficient way of doing that. Yeah. It is reckless to maintain an electoral model that so consistently produces such wildly disproportionate groups of MPs and leaves millions of voters feeling ignored. If these trends are allowed to continue, it is not difficult to see how turnout will fall further, results will become even more distorted, and political instability will grow. If we look at what's happened in actual ballot boxes since the last general election, Dr Hook. In 2025, the Lib Dems won more councillors than both Labour or the Conservatives for the first time, and won more local council by-elections than any other party. We Lib Dems look forward to May's local elections and are well up for the next general election whenever it is called. It is shaping up to be a battle to stop Trump's UK fanboys doing to our communities what their idol is doing to America. I am a bit worried, Dr Hook, about what the future holds for our country, but I also choose to be optimistic. The British people are bright, innovative, witty, sarky, and they won't put up with snake oil salesmen peddling conspiracy theories and division for very long. They'll let the government, whoever it is, know that they are livid with them. Not usually by rioting in the streets, but by taking the mickey out of them mercilessly. And long may that continue.
Yeah. For His Majesty's loyal opposition, Shadow Minister Kevin Howlingrake.
Thank you very much, Dr Hook. It's a pleasure to speak with you in the chair, not least because as a young teenager, Dr Hook was one of my favourite bands growing up in that period of time. Not all of you will have heard of Dr Hook. I was, absolutely. And can I thank my honourable friend, the member for Berwickshire, Roxburgh and Selkirk, for his excellent opening to this speech. He made so many good points, not least the level of support for this petition. 1 million people, the 8th most signed petition in history, 2,040 for my own constituency of Thirsk and Malton. Such an important debate. And of course this petition is calling for an immediate general election. This country wants and needs an immediate general election, was the wording of the petition. Listen, I'd be the first to admit, having been in government myself, governing is not easy. It is a difficult business. But I must say, one or two of the members opposite, in some of their remarks they made, I would name the honourable member for Edinburgh South West, talking about this, somehow this petition is about us sowing division. The honourable member for Southport, which is talking about somehow this is a Conservative plot to bring this petition to this debate. These are real people out there that are very concerned about what a number of people have said, about the betrayal they see, about how much they have been let down, and they are angry. So dismissing their concerns on the basis of some kind of political plot is a big mistake. It was also a mistake, I think, for the government to respond, for the government to respond as it did on the 11th of August last year when it first responded to this petition, saying that the government was fixing the foundations, it was rebuilding Britain, it was restoring confidence. This is a government that is not listening and does not understand what the people are saying to it. I have to give away to the member for Edinburgh South West.
I do thank him for giving way. I do think I've been slightly misrepresented, or perhaps I was being unclear. I perfectly understand why people signed the petition, and I explained that I do think a lot of people feel left behind by the way the economy has evolved over the last 20 years. And people are frustrated, and that frustration has been harvested by parties who offer no solutions to the problems. And that's perhaps the point I was making. And apologies, sincere apologies if I wasn't clear. Thank you.
Well, I welcome his explanation. I appreciate that, and he seems like a very decent man and decent member, so I appreciate that. But it's very important, of course, we do listen to the public, because I think some genuine concerns about what the government set out to do and what it's actually doing.
Would you give way at that point?
Happy to give way to my honourable friend.
The honourable gentleman for giving way most generous this time, and he's returned the favour of an intervention. Talk about listening to the public. Now, the public are very angry about the Chagos deal. Does my honourable friend think that the opposition parties should use all the levers possible in this place and the other place to kill this bill?
I agree with him entirely. It is a terrible bill. We've opposed it all the way along, paying tens of billions of pounds of taxpayers' money to give away your own territory and rent it back. It's the most ludicrous thing.
I'm being told by the clock this is getting way out of scope here. We're talking about a petition to have a general election, not...
One of the many things that these people who signed the petition are concerned about, Dr Hook. So one of the big things that the government promised, of course, which I agree with them on, is we need to encourage faster growth in our economy. Of course, that's right, but look at where growth is. I'll tell you where growth is. Growth is in inflation. Growth is inflation. Growth is unemployment, including youth unemployment, which is rising significantly. Now 5.2% of the working population is unemployed, 4.2% when they took over. Taxes are growing to the tune of £60-odd billion a year. That's against the backdrop of the promises that were made about a fully costed, fully funded manifesto. No wonder people are angry. Debt and borrowing are up. Borrowing on interest alone, gilt yields are higher than ever, 5.72%, £116 billion a year, Dr Hook, in terms of what we pay annually every year, purely on debt interest. Small boat numbers are up 13% year on year. And bills, the cost of living, of course, this is one of the greatest concerns at my constituents, and no doubt everybody's constituents has, the cost of living, electricity prices against a backdrop of a promise to cut them by £300 a year, the average household £190 a year more than they were paying for their energy. I'll give it again to the Honourable Gentleman for Edinburgh South West.
So on gilt rates, I think it is important to reflect that they are still higher in the UK than they would otherwise be because of Liz Truss's budget. But gilt rates are rising right around the world. You must absolutely accept that. So whilst they're higher in the UK, they're higher right around the world. Every developed country is faced with this challenge. Does he accept that? And they are higher in this country because of Liz Truss as well.
That last point is complete nonsense. I was going to agree with him in terms of the generally government borrowing is higher because where interest rates are generally, and the most important thing we can do is get inflation under control to reduce the cost of debt. But the reality is our margins above the rest of the world are higher than they have been for years. That is a fact I'm sure he won't dispute. So how do we get growth? How do we get growth? You do not go about it the way honourable members are talking about going about it. I listened to the Honourable Gentleman for Dartford. The Honourable Gentleman for Dartford, again, he made a very good speech in terms of in terms of the priorities for his constituency and what he's doing. But like a number of other members, all they've talked about, when they're talking about achieving growth, they're talking about long-term spending, like infrastructure. I'm not saying that's not important, or they're talking certain amounts of allocations of cash from the government to those areas. What they're not talking about is where growth is really driven from, is small businesses. That's where it's really driven from. Governments do not create jobs, not sustainably. The only thing that can create growth and increase the number of jobs in our economy is small businesses, and that's been notably absent from the comments and remarks of the members opposite. I'm happy to give way to the Honourable Member for Southport.
So appreciate you giving way. If he knows how to get growth, if he knows how to bring up the GDP of the country, why has the economy been stagnating since 2010?
Well, the UK economy went through many challenges, of course, but nevertheless, against the backdrop of those challenges, some of it caused by Brexit, and that's the reality. The change like that was bound to have a short-term effect, but a short-term effect. The country's growing faster than Germany and France during that period of time. So the reality is we grew with the third fastest growing economy in the G7 over that period of time. But back to where we are today, if he accepts, rather than chuntering from a sedentary position, that the reality around this is that business confidence, small business drives growth in the economy, drives a number of jobs for people in the economy. Business confidence in July of 2024 was +5, according to the Institute of Directors. Today, it is -66. One of the steepest falls in history in terms of where that confidence measure is. And I speak as somebody, Dr. Hook, as not somebody who's been a politician all his life. I've done that for 10 years. The 30 years previously, I started a small business. We grew into a large business. I've been through the ups and downs. What the country needs, what those businesses need, is confidence, stability of policy making. But what have we seen instead of that stability of policy? I'm going to make some progress. What we've seen in terms of that policy making, we have seen U-turn after U-turn. As my honourable friend, the member for Stockton West, mentioned the number of U-turns, and my honourable friend, the member for West Worcestershire.
Order. So we suspend for 15 minutes while we all go and do our thing. Okay, so back in here at 7:05. Is it 15 minutes?
Yes, and 12 minutes.
Okay, all right. I've got to go and do that as well. Yeah. Okay. Order. Okay, so we're 4 minutes early because I said 1905. So I will unpause Kevin Hollinrake.
Thank you, Doctor. And if I can resume where I left off. And I was talking about the many U-turns we've seen from this government. And of course, as my honourable friends have said on winter fuel allowance and family farm tax, and I just praise my honourable friend, the member for Keighley and Ilkley, for the incredible job he has done campaigning on that farm tax, as well as a family business tax as well, of course, which is even more pernicious in many ways, the grooming gangs as well. He did a huge amount on business rates, the latest U-turn coming down the track. And this is why people feel betrayed and angry. And I'm sure, having been there in the past myself, honourable members on the other side of the House feel betrayed and angry with their own leadership for marching them up the top of the hill and marching them back down again on many of the issues. But they do not feel as strongly betrayed, particularly as the business people in this country. The business people who need stability need to understand exactly what's coming down the track next. And we've had a Chancellor that has constantly allowed this speculation to take place months before a budget. That destroys confidence, which damages the economy. And that's where the investment comes from that drives the economy forward and drives the increased number of jobs in our economy. So it's the antithesis of what a responsible and good Chancellor should do. As I said before, governing is not easy. We had many of our challenges ourselves and we did not get everything right. But what we did during that difficult period of time, that 14 years, 1.2 million more people employed in our economy. Unemployment halved during our period in office. Our schools, 68% good or outstanding to 90% at the end of our tenure. 100,000 more doctors and nurses in the NHS. Record numbers of houses being built, 50-year records, all against the backdrop of COVID, cost of living crisis and other challenges we had right then when we were governing this country. It shows what's possible, of course. All at the same time, we were keeping the very dangerous Jeremy Corbyn out of number 10 Downing Street. Of course, many of the opposition supported his challenge for leadership. So we are here now, Dr. Hook, in terms of looking forward to a general election coming down the track. And we are ready when they are ready for a general election, because unlike them, we have a strong leader against their weak leader. We will bring forward a strong economy, a stronger economy, with stronger borders and a stronger country. We will cut the cost of doing government, £47 billion of savings, and with that savings we'll reduce debt, but also, crucially, we will cut the cost of doing business, particularly for small businesses. The scrapping of stamp duty for a primary home, the scrapping of business rates for any business that's spending less than £110,000 a year on business rates. These are measures that support small businesses. This is what we will do given the opportunity. We are all here, of course, in the national interest, to try and do the best by this country, the national interest. But in our view, the best national interest is for this government to leave office and put a general election to the people. Thank you.
Final frontbencher, Minister Anna Turley.
Thank you very much, Dr Hook, and it is, as always, a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And I would like to thank the Honourable Member for Berwickshire, Roxburgh and Selkirk for moving this motion, which of course he does on behalf of the signatories of the petition across the country asking for a general election. Now, I was very struck by how many members opposite prayed in aid of the number of people that signed this petition, and of course it is enough to bring this debate, which is important for us to take notice of. But as my honourable friend for Bury St Edmunds flagged, this number is actually down by 2/3 on this time last year. So I just want to leave that here to honourable members in the room to think about. You know, if numbers are the driving force of how people feel and the strength of feeling for a general election, perhaps members opposite can reflect on what that decline by 2/3 represents. I also want to thank all the honourable members who participated today. So many of them have shown themselves to be true advocates of their communities and their constituents, and we've seen some fantastic examples today today of passion and commitment to the issues that people care about in their communities and how hard so many members of Parliament are working in the face of so much cynicism around politics today. And I'm extremely grateful for the opportunity to respond to this debate on behalf of the Labour Government. A Labour Government I am extremely proud to be part of, following 14 years of Conservative and Lib Dem chaos and decline. And Dr Hook, I've listened to the contributions of the Honourable Member for Berwickshire, Roxburgh and Selkirk and others in this place. And it's clear now, as it was at the last general election, that the Tories are not serious, cannot be trusted, haven't learnt from the failures they made in office. And I didn't hear any apologies today, any humility about the chaos and the ruin that they left. And the noise and the bluster of impotent opposition that we've heard today is leaving us to get on with the job of fixing the mess that they left. And Dr Hook, I'm not often surprised these days, but I have to admit I am today, because it is a surprise to see the Honourable Member for Ashfield here at this debate. Too often the problem with reform is that they can't deliver the change the country needs because they're not fit to govern, and despite being paid to represent their constituents, too often they withdraw questions in this House, they miss votes, they sit as bystanders in the gallery, but yet they always manage to turn up when there's a chance to get on telly or put a clip on social media. And I hope the Honourable Gentleman today, as a former Tory himself, is happy to welcome now the 23rd former Conservative MP to join Reform. And I think if that doesn't say a message that Reform are the same old failed Tories in a slightly different shade of blue, then I don't know what does. Another party that doesn't believe in the NHS, doesn't believe in rights for working people, and has nothing to offer people on things like the cost of living that we know matter to them. Now, Dr Hook, this Labour government was elected with the largest majority that any party has secured since the last Labour government's landslide victory in 1997. This Labour government is committed to delivering the people's priorities, and since coming into office, we've been busy delivering on our promise of change. As Labour members across this House have articulated so clearly, we know we were elected with a clear mandate to deliver the change that people asked for. My honourable friend from Southport said that people voted to reject the previous government's record on 14 years of austerity, and he's absolutely right on that. Because let's be honest about where we started when we won the election in 2024. Now, decades of decline don't disappear in months, we know that. The financial crisis, Brexit, a pandemic, war in Europe, all help to drive the challenges that we face financially and in this country. But you place on top of that years of weak and irresponsible government that left living standards falling, public services stretched to breaking point, too many communities feeling forgotten and left behind, and as the Honourable Member for Hazel Grove said, a steaming pile of rubbish. I couldn't agree more with her analysis. This was the inheritance that we had. But we know that life is still harder than it should be for so many in this country, and I understand that's why so many people have signed this petition today, because people are absolutely right to be impatient. We know that the cost of living continues to bear down on people, but we are taking rapid action to ease that burden. I am proud that living standards are forecast to grow by 2.9% over this Parliament. Under the last failed Tory government, disposable income fell for the first time since records began in the 1950s, hardly a record that members here can begin to defend. And we're taking action to tackle the deficit that they left, the crisis that they left, a crashing of an economy. They allowed Liz Truss to experiment with the country's finances. They sent mortgages, rents and bills soaring. Now, since coming into office, we are reversing that decline. Families are already £800 better off. As the Honourable Member for Kilmarnock said, 200,000 workers are seeing a pay rise in Scotland. I will just in a moment. Mortgages are down £1,400 compared with where they were when we won the election, and wages are up more in 10 months than they were in 10 years of the Tories. That's a record to be proud of.
I thank the Minister for giving way, but that is just not what people in Keighley and Ilkley and across the Wirth Valley are feeling. That why is it that the Labour government have bringing through increasing the amount of tax that a basic rate taxpayer will be paying by another £220 this year? Why is it that the Labour-run Bradford Council have increased council tax by 14.99% this year, on top of decisions that the government is making that wasn't in their manifesto, like rolling out digital ID, £1.8 £8 billion, like Chagos deal, £47 billion. These are things that the government are doing beyond the manifesto promises, yet taxing hard-working people across Keighley.
Intervention. Minister.
I appreciate the honourable gentleman's attempts to reiterate the speech that he made, but I just thought he would actually be grateful that there are 3,250 children in Keighley who are going to be benefiting from the lifting of the two-child limit. I mean, these are children who we are investing in, who are going to contribute to the future, and we are breaking cycles of dependency, and I thought he would welcome that. And people whose mortgages have come down under this Labour government in his constituency, I'm sure, are also very grateful for that. In November, Dr Hook, my right honourable friend, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, delivered a budget that is bearing down on the cost of living and lifting millions of children out of poverty. Indeed, the honourable member's constituency of Berwickshire, Roxburgh and Selkirk, nearly 1,600 children could benefit from the abolition of the two-child benefit cap, thanks to action taken by this Labour government. And when we talk about the reasons that members of opposite have given today for calling a general election, yes, of course.
I think there's a danger that the Minister's falling into the trap, which is the same trap the government fell into in terms of its formal response to this petition. And you're telling people you should be grateful. We're doing all these things, you should be grateful. People in my constituency don't feel grateful. They feel betrayed by a catalogue of broken promises.
The honourable gentleman stood up and talked, as we've heard, about the glass half empty. I think it's really important, if we're restoring trust in politics, that we remind people about all the things that are actually happening in this world. Of course, we know it takes time for people to feel this in their pockets, and we're confident with every paycheck that happens this year, people will feel that more and more. But the reality is, if we don't stand up and remind people about the impact, the change that governments make, these changes haven't happened by chance. They've happened by the choices made by this Labour government, and I'm proud to defend them. And as I was going on to say, the reason given by members opposite for calling this debate is about talking about, we've heard about manifesto promises and so on. I just want to run through some of the manifesto promises and some of the commitments that this government has made to knock down the argument that they said. This year we will be taking £150 off energy bills, living wage is up £900 per year. We've extended the £3 bus fare. Interest rates have been cut 6 times. We've frozen prescription fees to keep the costs under £10. We've lifted 500,000 children out of poverty. That's an extra 3,000 in my constituency of Redcar. For pensioners, we're protecting the triple lock, worth over £1,900 the course of this Parliament. And for so many of those parents who, as you rightly articulated, in your constituency, people are still feeling the squeeze in the cost of living. That's exactly why we've provided 30 hours of free childcare to help that mum who is struggling to get into work and get support with childcare that she needs. That's £8,000 a year for parents. We've set up 750 primary school breakfast clubs to help those kids get a healthy start in life. I've been to those breakfast clubs and I've seen the children not just get a healthy meal to start the day, but having dance classes, having exercise, getting their blood pumping, getting ready for a day and starting the day ready to learn and breaking the cycle of poverty that we've seen hold too many children back in our constituencies. I will.
I'm very grateful to her giving way. Does she agree that you don't reduce dependency and you don't bring children out of poverty by driving their parents out of work? And there are hundreds of thousands of more people unemployed because of the policies her party has pursued. Does she acknowledge that is the case?
I would always say the honourable gentleman was there when he witnessed 2,300 jobs in my constituency lost overnight in the steel industry, and having to deal with the consequences of that. His government would know all about putting people out of work. And as I said, this is about breaking the cycle. 3/4 of the children that are growing up in poverty are in working households. The economy that we saw develop under the Conservative government was an economy where work just didn't pay. People were working all the hours they could, they were working all the shifts they could, and they still weren't able to feed their families. And that's why we're supporting parents in getting back to work and getting their children happy and healthy and fed in school. I also want to support the point my honourable friend from Portsmouth made about the veterans strategy. I know there are 9,000 veterans in Portsmouth who have benefited from the hard work and campaigning she's done in her constituency. We've seen the biggest uplift in defence spending, and that's something I'm deeply proud of in this country. When we are facing a deeply insecure world at the moment, we have a Prime Minister who is rebuilding Britain's standing on the global stage and is putting our defence spending at the heart of economic regeneration in constituencies like ours. I could go on for manifesto pledges that have been met, banning trail hunting, ending hereditary peers, the Football Governance Bill, giving football fans a real voice in their football clubs. We promised 2 million more NHS appointments. We've delivered 5 million more already. We've halved the number of asylum hotels, 1 million potholes fixed. We've heard a lot about potholes. The honourable member from Dartford has campaigned very hard on roads and potholes in his constituency. We're supporting renters with abolishing no-fault evictions. We've established Great British Energy to drive our energy renewal in this country. We've delivered pension justice for mine workers. And in constituencies like mine, we're now going to see a named police officer in every ward, thanks to Cleveland Police, going forward from May. And that's 3,000 more police already. So that is a lot done. But as I think my honourable friend from Hitchin described it, these are down payments on progress. This is just the beginning. This is as every month that goes on, people will start to feel more and more the benefit of the Labour government in this pocket, and I'm proud to have delivered that. And I want to just make the point, the honourable gentleman, the right honourable gentleman opposite, talked about the importance of stability to small business. Well, he's absolutely right, and that completely flies in the face of why he'd want to call for another general election. The members opposite may have enjoyed the chaos and the upheaval of the last period of government, where we had 4 elections and a referendum in 4 years. I was here, I witnessed it all. And look at the disastrous effect that that had. But the public voted to end the chaos, and they want us just to get on with governing the country and fixing the mess that they left behind. This takes time, this takes patience, but this is a Labour government that is committed to delivering on that change that the country voted for in the last general election. As I've set out here, there are manifesto pledges that have been given, and there's a manifesto pledges that are being delivered. I'm extremely grateful for my honourable friends for highlighting so many of the positive impacts that this government is having on the lives of their constituents. We will continue to take the difficult and strong decisions in the national interest after 14 years of failed Conservative governments. We saw a merry-go-round of failed Prime Ministers that slashed our public services, crashed our economy and frayed the social fabric of our country. Governments that cut the NHS year after year and betrayed the promises it made to the country. As the Prime Minister said in his New Year message, this is the year the country will turn the corner along the path of national renewal. Dr Hook, we will not shy away from making the big calls that are right for our country's future. We're proud of the progress so far. We know people will feel the change this year in their pay packets and on the streets. We are proud to stand on our record at the next general election, and we look forward to it. And in the meantime, we will get on with delivering the change the public voted for, the change they expect from a Labour government, building a fairer, more hopeful and better Britain. Thank you.
John Lamont to wind up.
Thank you very much, Dr Huck. To reassure colleagues, I will not detain you for too much longer. I had to start by thanking everybody, the over 1 million people across the UK who signed this important petition, and to all honourable and right honourable members who participated in this important debate, because be under no doubt those 1 million people or so who supported this petition feel very, very strongly about this issue and the failure of the government. Can I particularly thank my Conservative colleagues, the member for Worcestershire West, Keighley and Ilkley, Stockton West and Thurston Malton for their excellent speeches, which I think spoke to the nub of the concerns that our constituents are feeling. For the Labour MPs who bothered to turn up to defend their government's record, I don't know what sweeties they were being offered tonight to come along. I think the honourable member for Hitchin, give him his dues. I think he got the tone just about right, recognising, as I said, the people out there do have big concerns about what is going on, not just with this government, but generally with politics. And I think he did speak to that. I would, although say to him, I don't know what he would say to the 15% extra people, young people in his constituency who are currently without work because of the policies that his government are implemented. Youth unemployment, as he will know, is up across the whole of the United Kingdom. It's up 15% in his seat. The member for Southport, I'm afraid, got the tone completely wrong, misjudged the moment. I look forward to him bumping into one of his constituents who might have signed this petition in this coming weekend. And I know we're all out and about in our constituencies. Many of the members opposite spoke about how this is a listing government, and that's why you do so many U-turns. I'm afraid that doesn't really wash, because what you miss, the point that you miss around that is the worry, uncertainty and fear whilst these policies are being implemented. The family farm tax is one example, the winter fuel payment is another. Many pubs and other businesses who are terrified, unsure about how they're going to pay their rates and higher taxes. They are terrified about this. And yes, the U-turn may come eventually, but for those months and months, those weeks and weeks when people are facing that, the prospect of that change, that causes a lot of anxiety. And sadly for many farmers, which I suspect is why the Prime Minister ultimately had to intervene, they are no longer here to see the benefit of the U-turn. Now, the reality is taxes have gone up despite the fact the Prime Minister said they would not before the election. The benefits bill is going up. More hard-working people are having to pay for that benefits, again, despite what the Prime Minister said before the election. There is a real sense of betrayal out there. I think in the deepest souls of the members opposite, they understand that too, despite what they have said today. As I say, I'm very grateful to everybody who has participated, and hopefully the people, the million or so people who have signed this petition, and the 3 million people, the 4 million people who have signed petitions about this, feel as if they've had their voices heard today. Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered E-petition 727309 relating to a general election. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. I think the ayes have it. Order, order. Sitting suspended until tomorrow.
Thank you very much.